Chapter 1182. Currently, the giant dragons are above the world. Apart from a few evil dragons who do evil, the other giant dragons usually don't get involved in the conflicts between the various races on the continent. The Roth Empire's power has already slightly surpassed the various races, and they have formed an alliance with the powerful demons and the elves during wartime. These three alliances are enough to wipe out the other races easily. They are the biggest uncertainty in this peace talk. Once the war starts, the humans and demons will be able to reap more benefits from this war due to their strong power. The forest trolls and orcs have also formed an alliance. Both races are at the front in terms of power. They have many powerhouses and sufficient mid-range combat power. After forming an alliance, they will be able to protect themselves in the war, and gain benefits by invading the weaker races. The dwarfs have always been neutral. They are mainly craftsmen, and have very few powerhouses in their race. However, with their extraordinary skills and advanced weapons, Isen Castle has also become the most difficult castle to break into. The goblins are at the bottom in terms of power, and they have rich mineral resources. Although they have a huge number of underground caverns, they don't have much ability to resist if they encounter a large-scale invasion. Chaos City and the goblins should have formed an alliance, right? Although they have no choice but to form an alliance, at least they have some ability to protect themselves, Meg said. The hill nodded slightly. However, these were all commonplace topics. Anyone who had some understanding of the situation on the continent could talk about it for an entire afternoon. If Meg was only at this level, she felt that this conversation could already end. Miss Hill should have heard a lot of these things. There is indeed nothing to be burdensome about. Meg seemed to have seen through the Hill's thoughts. He smiled, and said, however, what I want to talk about today is not the situation on the continent, but how to solve the problem. Solve the problem? The Hill raised her eyebrows and looked at Meg. Does Mr. Meg have a solution? Meg smiled, and said, the humans and demons who are getting stronger by the day have started to expand. They have formed an alliance of villains that can challenge the giant dragons. They have conquered the Norland continent and gained more territory. They have suppressed the other races under their feet. This is the main reason why the situation has become tense. The goblins, dwarfs, and other small races were only forced to band together. Furthermore, it was already too late for them to cozy up to someone powerful. Once the war started, they would basically become sacrificial lambs. Although the alliance between the various races was intertwined, the relationship between them was not so simple and harmonious. The hatred left behind by the several hundred years of racial war could not be completely resolved in a short 100 years of peace. Hence, if we can use our strategy to divide the alliance of the strong races and strengthen the alliance of the weak races, the situation on the continent will return to a relatively balanced state. Then, the war among species won't start again. Even if the peace treaty can't be renewed, the situation on the Norland continent will continue to be relatively peaceful. Joining forces. The Hill whispered. Her eyes lit up. As a businesswoman, she rarely thought about problems from the perspective of various races. No matter how powerful Buffett Bank was, it was still just a bank. How could it shake the decisions of a race? Even the steam locomotive was only meant to let the various races see the possibility of the integration of the power of technology with the Norland continent, thereby influencing the various races' decisions. However, in Meg's words, he was already treating the various races as pawns, and the Norland continent as the chessboard. Such a setup and height seemed to have opened the door to a new world in front of her. When she looked at Meg again, her gaze had already changed. He seemed to be covered with a mysterious veil, making it difficult for others to see through him. However, Meg's words were still a little broad. The game between the various races was all about scheming and plotting. If it could be divided and formed an alliance so easily, it wouldn't have become such a tense situation now. I'd like to hear the details, the Hill said to Meg. The alliance between the Roth Empire and the demons is the first thing to be resolved. Back then, the demons invaded the Wind Forest and almost wiped out the elves. The hatred and conflict between the two cannot be resolved. With the alliance between the Roth Empire and the elves, we can divide the alliance of villains and intensify the conflict between the three races. From there, We can dissolve the indirect alliance between the three races and form an internal restriction. The alliance between the orcs and the forest trolls is relatively weaker, so we can continue to maintain it and achieve the effect of restricting the Roth Empire. The alliance between Chaos City and the goblins, and it would be best to add the dwarfs. The goblins' mines, the dwarfs' powerful skills, and Chaos City's railways and steam locomotives might be able to accelerate the evolution of society. A weak alliance can also have the power to protect itself, Meg said. The hill was deep in thought. According to what Meg said, the situation on the Norland continent would indeed become controllable. At least, no race would dare to start an all-out war easily. Could this be the so-called alliance? Now, is Miss Hill willing to be my ally? Meg asked the hill with a smile. Mr. Meg, even if you don't become a chef or an inventor, you can still become an outstanding politician. The hill reached out her hand to Meg with a smile, and said, "The hill hopes to hear your detailed plan. The Buffett family will do our best to maintain peace in this world. I'm afraid this is not a task that the Buffett family and I can accomplish. However, with your current relationship with the City Lord's castle and Chaos City's power, we still have a chance to change this world." Meg held the hill's hand with a smile. "Then, let's make this world chaotic first." When they left Buffett Banks, it was already close to noon. The hill got the assistant to send Meg back to the restaurant. "Thank you." Meg alighted from the car and smiled at the assistant. He watched the horse-drawn carriage leave before he turned to enter the restaurant. As a fan of the fake army, Meg spent several months to come up with a detailed plan to subvert the various races based on the historical records and military books he read when he was young and the wisdom and experience of his predecessors. Meg was a chef who opened a restaurant. He had to do something for the peace of this world in order to let his customers enjoy a delicious meal with peace of mind. A racial war was not something that could be stopped by one person alone. Even if he recovered Alex's peak power, his brute strength was still very insignificant in the face of an entire race. "Father, you're finally back. We're starving. What are we having for lunch today?" Amy, who had her chin resting on the counter, asked expectantly as her eyes lit up the moment Meg entered. She slid down from her chair and ran into Meg's arms. Mia and the rest had also arrived, and were looking at Meg expectantly. They had not eaten Boss's delicacies for 2 days, and were not used to it. "We're having steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers for lunch today," Meg said to Amy and the ladies with a smile. They were the reason why he wanted to do this. The hill stood alone by the window for an hour. When he turned around, his gaze had become clear and determined. He picked up the map on the table and went out. He instructed coldly, "Go to the City Lord's castle." Whispers of the World. Chapter 1183. 10,000 elves surrounded the underground cavern where the night elves were. Ever since the fire incident a few days ago, the Wind Forest had sent another 5,000 elite guards over to get rid of the night elves in the shortest time possible. Although the night elves had gained quite a reputation on the Norland continent recently, there were only slightly over 1,000 of them so far, and most of them were slaves with low abilities. If it weren't for the complex topography of the underground cavern and the endless traps and spell formations, the guards would have exterminated the night elves long ago. This encirclement had been going on for more than 10 days. This place was within the territory of the goblins, and goblin spies often appeared in the mountains not far away. There was even a goblin army stationed several kilometers away. Although they were hiding in the underground cavern, according to the high priest's detection, there were more than 10,000 of them. This encirclement had to be completed as soon as possible. The long supply line and the harsh environment around the underground cavern were not easy for the elven guards who participated in the encirclement. Because of the mining, the underground cavern was surrounded by barren mountains. The bare mountain rocks couldn't block the cold wind for the elven warriors in this cold winter. It rained a few days ago, which made the situation even worse. Many elven warriors were already frostbitten. They couldn't drink the sweet flower dew or eat the fresh and delicious food. They had to endure the cold in this world of ice and snow while gnawing on the cold dry rations. The elven guards were a little dispirited. "Brother, tell me, we were also captured. Why should we help them go against the princess?" She's fighting for us, isn't she? A young elf looked around, and whispered to the elf beside him when he saw that there was no one around. The princess is a good elf. That elf looked in the direction of the underground cavern with a gloomy expression, and said, but what she's doing won't succeed. If we want to live, we have to accept our fate and be inferior to others. This is our fate. But the young elf still wanted to say something. Stand up, all of you. Right at this moment, a loud shout accompanied by the crisp sound of a whip rang out. A tall elf wearing golden armor and riding a tall magic beast retracted his whip. He looked at the elf who had been whipped, and shouted, Stand up, all of you. Don't think that you've worked hard. You still have food to eat every day. The traitors on the mountain are completely out of food. Lord Borge has said that if we don't accept surrender, we'll surround the catacombs and starve them all to death. All of the elves who were eating lunch stood up one after another, and most of them wore complicated expressions on their faces. Some of them were captured by the demons and brought back to the Wind Forest before being exiled. Most of them were ordinary elves who were classified as low-level elves and were forced to undertake military service. They didn't have the freedom to choose. They took on the most dangerous missions, received the meager amount of food, and lived a slightly more dignified life than the slaves in the guards. When Princess Irina raised the banner of freedom and rebellion, and announced to the entire continent that she would fight for freedom for the low-level elves who were oppressed at the bottom of the elven society, they became the sharp blades in the hands of the nobles who enslaved them. Their swords could only be swung at the elves who were braver than them, the elves who fought for freedom. They silently endured the whips and insults of the high-level elves, all for the sake of the rations in their hands that were hard to swallow and to survive. The world outside the Wind Forest wasn't beautiful. If they fell into the hands of the demons, their lives would be worse than death. The world described by Her Highness was very beautiful, and freedom was so desirable. However, in the face of the powerful rule of the Wind Forest, even the powerful Her Highness could only hide in the catacombs with the night elves and die of hunger. Let's eat. The elf from before took a big bite of the rations in his hand and whispered to the young elf. He stared at the elven general, but his heart was filled with helplessness. The young elf's eyes were filled with tears. He put the rations to his mouth, but he couldn't swallow them. The elven general said with a smug expression, Master Borge said that we'll be able to collect the corpses of those traitors by tomorrow at the latest, thereby putting an end to this laughable rebellion. Hierarchy can never be overthrown, just like how those traitors can never have food. At this moment, a rich barbecued meat aroma suddenly wafted out from all the holes in the catacombs. It was blown by the wind, and instantly drifted in all directions. It smells so good. At the foot of the mountain, the eyes of the elves who were still holding rations in their hands lit up. They subconsciously swallowed their saliva when they smelled the aroma of the barbecued meat. Then, they couldn't help but start to search for the source of the aroma. The rich barbecued meat aroma made them salivate crazily just by smelling it. The elves who had eaten rations for more than 10 days and hadn't eaten a single bite of meat almost had no resistance in the face of this aroma. This aroma was simply too tempting. It was far beyond the aroma of the roasted game that they usually encountered by chance. Just by smelling the aroma, they could almost see the glistening barbecued meat on the fire. This aroma is coming from the catacombs. They haven't run out of food yet. They're barbecuing meat, some elves exclaimed. Their voices were filled with envy and yearning. The elves quickly confirmed that this aroma was indeed coming from the catacombs. The fact that it could come from the depths of the catacombs and create such a strong surrounding effect meant that there was definitely a lot of barbecued meat. It was probably to the extent that everyone could eat it. The elven general who had previously declared that the night elves had run out of food and that they could launch an all-out attack tomorrow to get rid of all the traitors changed his expression. These words were personally said by Lord Borge during this morning's meeting. According to the information from the spies, the night elves should have run out of food for a few days now. They didn't even have any wild vegetables. How could there still be barbecued meat? This must be the scheme of those traitors. They've been besieged for more than half a month, and no one has been able to escape. They've long run out of food and ammunition. Pick up your weapons and guard these catacombs. That elven general was exasperated. He whipped the long whip in his hand in the air and left quickly on his mount. This matter had to be reported to Lord Borge immediately. So the night elves still have rations. Many elves heaved a sigh of relief. They didn't want to kill their own kind, not to mention that they were all elves of the same status as them. Meanwhile, the eyes of the elves who were originally looking down on the night elves also lit up. A young elf put down the coarse rations in his hand, and asked his brother, "Brother, since we're all living for food, why don't we stand up and eat meat like them and live freely?" Chapter 1184. Ever since the encirclement half a month ago, the atmosphere in the Night Elves' cave had never been as relaxed and joyful as it was today. The tempting aroma of roasted meat passed through the alleys along with the breeze, making the elves guarding the caves feel excited. The news had already been sent down this morning. Today's lunch was roasted meat. Ever since joining the Night Elves, because of the crazy encirclement of the Wind Forest, their food every meal was strictly controlled, and they basically never had enough to eat. But no one complained about this, because Her Highness had not eaten since half a month ago, so they had nothing to complain about. But since breakfast 2 days ago, they had eaten the world's most delicious fried rice, and each of them had a big bowl. The fried rice, known as rainbow fried rice, was so delicious that the elves were amazed, and the amount was enough to fill an adult elf stomach. The gloomy atmosphere in the cave began to be filled with vitality and hope after 2 days of delicious fried rice. It must be because Her Highness had solved their food problem, so they had the courage to continue guarding the cave and fight for their ideals and freedom. And the roasted meat at noon today was like a kitten's gentle tail, teasing their hearts. They had already swallowed their saliva countless times. In the depths of the cave, a rather spacious cave had been transformed into the main kitchen of the Night Elves. Turn all the roasted meat over, then brush it evenly with sauce. Phyllis instructed the 30 over elves to turn the roasted beef over on the grill, and then instructed the elves waiting at the side, send the first batch of roasted meat to the warriors guarding the front lines. Yes. The elves responded and began to do as Phyllis instructed in an orderly manner. To let all the Night Elves have a portion of roasted beef, we still have to roast another 5 batches. Phyllis wiped the sweat on her forehead with a silk handkerchief. The temperature in the cave had risen a little due to the dozens of stoves and fires. Cooking for more than 1,000 people was completely different from cooking in the restaurant. She originally only needed to cook for Her Highness, but now she had to command dozens of people to cook together. This was undoubtedly a huge challenge for her. This was the first time she was grilling meat in the catacombs. After all, they were currently in a wartime situation. There was no way she could cut the beef into small cubes and skewer them with bamboo strips like she did in the restaurant. Therefore, after fumbling around for 2 days, she managed to cut the beef into steaks. However, instead of frying them, she chose to grill them with charcoal. She had learned how to make beef kebabs, yangju fried rice, and braised chicken and rice at Mammoth. Even if she couldn't make the dishes herself, she still wanted to serve the most delicious food to the soldiers working hard on the front lines. At the same time, she didn't want to disgrace the culinary skills that Mr. Meg had taught her. Looking at the smiles and satisfaction on the faces of the elven warriors, she felt a strong sense of accomplishment in her heart. All the hard work and tiredness meant nothing to her. All of the elves in the kitchen looked at Phyllis with admiration in their eyes. As the personal maid of the princess, Phyllis' cooking skills were simply too amazing. Ever since she had taken over the kitchen, eating every day had become something that all of the elves looked forward to the most. Ordinary ingredients were cooked into delicious food under her command and guidance. Those bottles and jars seemed to contain the source of delicious food, bringing about an unparalleled delicious experience. Princess, if they know that we still have rations, will they give up on the siege and start attacking the catacombs fiercely instead? Ashley, the captain of the Night Elves, looked at Irina with some concern. This afternoon, Irina had suddenly released the aura seal on all the passageways and used the array to transport all the aroma of the grilled meat out of the catacombs. This action would definitely inform the elves besieging the catacombs that they still had rations in the catacombs. During this period of time, their situation of surrounding the catacombs but not attacking might change because of this. They would start attacking the catacombs at all costs. Ashley, If this situation of surrounding the catacombs but not attacking continues for a month, what do you think will happen to the night elves? What will happen to the wind forest? Irina turned to look at Ashley and asked. Ashley was slightly stunned. After thinking seriously for a while, her expression changed slightly, and she said, "The wind forest hasn't fought with other races for 100 years and has accumulated a lot of resources and wealth. It's not difficult to maintain 10,000 guards besieging the catacombs. And after a month, the rations that the night elves obtained yesterday will be used up again, and will fall into a rations crisis again. If that's the case, we're the ones who need to change." Irina's lips curled into a smile as she looked at the elves who were in a bit of a commotion at the foot of the mountain. Those in power don't take these low-level warriors seriously at all. After layers of embezzlement, what's left in their hands is only dry rations that are hard to swallow. It's common for officers to casually beat and scold them. Then I'll use this aroma to disrupt their morale and let those low-level soldiers know that we're fighting for freedom. We're standing and living, but we can still eat delicious grilled meat. And they're fighting for those who exploit and torture them, but they can only have their freedom restricted and live an ignoble life. Princess, are you trying to instigate them to defect? Ashley's eyes lit up, and she couldn't help but raise her voice. Ever since the catacombs were besieged, the night elves had lost the channel for fresh blood to flow in. As the number of guards increased, the catacombs were completely surrounded. There were no reinforcements, and they couldn't expand their scale. To the night elves, this had become a dead end. However, Ashley soon said worriedly, for the current night elves, instigation is a double-edged sword. The addition of fresh blood can increase the strength of the night elves, but the increase in the number of people in the catacombs will also accelerate the consumption of rations, making our time even more tight. Instigation isn't something that can be accomplished overnight. However, as long as their morale is disrupted, those low-level elves will have a yearning for us. Whether it's a breakthrough or a counterattack, we'll have a greater chance of success. Irina said calmly. She retracted her gaze and turned to walk into the passageway. This grilled meat smells really good. Bean Sprout's culinary skills have indeed been trained well. Lord Borge, the aroma of grilled meat is coming from the catacombs. Could it be that there's a mistake in the information and they still have surplus food? Not far from the foot of the mountain, in a large, gorgeous tent, a few elven generals gathered together and looked anxiously at Borge, who was sitting at the head of the table. Borge's expression was also somewhat gloomy. Since the day before yesterday, he hadn't received any more news from the spies he had arranged. However, according to the previous news, the night elves should have completely run out of food. Why was there grilled meat now? Could it be that Irina had gone out before? Chapter 1185. The elves in the underground cavern received their share of the roast beef one after another. The rich aroma wafted over, and the freshly baked beef was still steaming. The juices exploded in their mouths as they bit into the plump beef, causing their taste buds to explode. The delicious beef and the delicious sauce were a perfect match, bringing about an unparalleled delicious experience. So delicious. Sounds of praises could be heard from every corner of the underground cavern. The night elves were enjoying the taste and satisfaction of a whole piece of beef. Many of them rarely had the chance to eat meat in the past 100 years, let alone such delicious beef. The aroma of the roast beef spread around the underground cavern, causing a commotion among the elves at the foot of the mountain. The news that the night elves still had food spread quickly, and the aroma of the roast meat was the best proof. The elves who were eating the dry rations that were hard to swallow, smelling the tempting aroma of the roast meat, and listening to the praises coming from the cavern, became more and more upset. Amy's fat-head fish slaughtering fat-head fish, the efficiency was indeed extraordinary. A golden blade flashed past, and a lively fat-head fish became 2 flat fish heads. Lunch was a fish feast, with a serving of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers and a large portion of spicy grilled fish. Everyone switched between spicy and sour dishes, enjoying the delicious experience brought by the 2 classic cooking methods of fish. Boss, should we open for business at night? After lunch, MIA looked at Meg and said worriedly, "We've been closed for 3 consecutive days, the customers seem to be quite resentful." We went out for business this time to bring new dishes to the customers. This is the first day of rest, so we won't open for business tonight. Meg shook his head with a smile. Since they had already stood up during the day, they could just rest for another day at night. Then I'll continue to open the ice cream shop in the afternoon. Mia nodded. It was indeed tiring for the boss to make a trip to Isen Castle. Has Master Rome started to forge weapons again? I heard that he hasn't forged weapons for 2 years. Elizabeth asked curiously, her fists unconsciously clenched together. Master Rome's reputation was not small even among the dragons. That was because Alex's Tian-Du sword had once killed many extremely famous giant dragons, and the Tian-Du sword was forged by the Master of Rome. In the previous battle with Fox, she was seriously injured and on the verge of death. It was Alex who saved her. During this period of recuperation in Chaos City, she had almost recovered from her injuries, so she was also secretly looking for Alex. She had mixed feelings about Alex. Back then, her father disappeared mysteriously, and no one knew if he was dead or alive. She blamed all of this on Alex. He was the one who made her father lose his heart as a powerhouse. As a result, he left the Dragon Island alone and disappeared without a trace. On that day, he had descended from the sky and severely injured Fox. He had said, "I'm going to save this dragon, and who dares to stop me?" It was firmly engraved in her mind. Why? He was clearly her enemy, the person she hated the most. Why would he save her? And, he even applied medicine for her. She wanted to find him and ask him all the questions face to face. No matter if it was about why he saved her, or about her father. However, Alex came and went like a shadow. Although he had appeared twice previously, he disappeared without a trace each time. There was no way to find him at all. Meg said that the Master of Rome had forged a new cleaver for him. That made her think of Alex immediately, so she couldn't help but ask out of curiosity. "Maybe I'm just lucky," Meg said with a smile. He didn't reveal too much about the Master of Rome. Elizabeth didn't ask any further. The forging of the Tian-Du sword was something that happened hundreds of years ago. The Master of Rome obviously wouldn't know about Alex's whereabouts. "Mr. Mac." Just then, there was a knock on the door, followed by a low and hoarse voice. "It's Master Julian." Amy's eyes lit up. She jogged to the door, tiptoed, and pushed the door open. "Little Amy, you're back," Julian said with a smile when he saw Amy standing at the door. "Yes, Master Julian. Are you here for lunch?" Amy nodded and asked curiously. "No, Master has already had lunch." Julian shook his head, his face still full of a kind smile. "I wanted to ask little Amy, do you want to learn magic this afternoon? You didn't come yesterday. If you don't learn ice magic for 2 days straight, you might be weaker than that silly melee magic." "Okay, I'll go to class this afternoon. I had a lot of fun with Father 2 days ago." Amy nodded obediently. "Master Julian, I'm really sorry for not asking for Amy's leave in advance yesterday." Meg was a little apologetic. As a father, he always skipped classes with Amy. Even he was a little embarrassed. "It's okay. It's okay. Of course, the most important thing is that little Amy is happy." Julian's face immediately glowed when he saw that Amy was willing to go to class. He waved his hand nonchalantly, and took Amy back to the magic potion shop for class. "Mr. Mac, you're finally back. Is the restaurant open for business this afternoon? I'm so hungry that my chest is sticking to my back." Harrison, who had just walked to the entrance of the restaurant, saw Meg about to turn around and go in. He immediately let out a wolf's howl, and his huge body of 200 to 300 kilograms ran over like a whirlwind. He grabbed Meg's arm. Mag looked at Harrison's jiggling fat, and retracted his arm without batting an eyelid. He held back his laughter, and said, "The restaurant is closed today, and will be open for business tomorrow. Furthermore, your description of chest to back is a little inaccurate. There's still a long way to go." Harrison's face fell, and he grumbled, "Mr. Mac, I feel uncomfortable all over if I don't eat your food for a day. If I don't eat it for 3 days, it's going to kill me." Meg was unmoved. He shook his head with a smile, and said, "We will be launching a new dish tomorrow. Let's go back for today." "New dish? Harrison's eyes lit up instantly. He winked at Meg and said, "Mr. Mac, given our relationship, can you reveal some information about the new dish to me? What kind of food are we eating tomorrow?" "Fish." Meg only revealed one word. Harrison saw that he couldn't get any more information from Meg, so he had no choice but to go in. Meg turned around and was about to go in when a series of hurried gallops sounded. At the same time, a loud voice sounded. "Is Amy's boss, Meg, here? The King of the Roth Empire has a decree." "The King of the Roth Empire?" Meg stopped in his tracks and turned around to see a black unicorn galloping over and stopping at the entrance of the restaurant. There was a young knight in black soft armor sitting on it. Wonderful bookhouse. Chapter 1186. The young knight sat on his horse, looked down at Meg, and asked, "You are the restaurant's owner, Meg?" "Yes." Meg nodded. He was rather curious about what decree the King of the Roth Empire had for him that he would send the king's personal guards to deliver it to him personally. This knight looked to be about 25 or 26 years old, but he was already at the 6th tier. He could be considered a young talent with decent talent. "The king's decree should be received on one knee," the young knight said in a low voice. "I am not a citizen of the Roth Empire, and I am in Chaos City. Why should I kneel?" Meg was unmoved, and retorted with a question. "You." The young knight's face turned cold, and he raised the horsewhip in his hand. He recalled his leader's instructions. This chef was personally invited by the king, and he must not hurt him. He forced himself to put down the whip, and coldly said, "The king's decree is to invite the owner of Amy's, Mr. Meg, to Rodu to cook for a royal banquet. The flying steed has been prepared, and we will set off immediately." He could not understand why the king would go through so much trouble to invite a mere chef here, and even send a flying steed to receive him. However, he did not like this chef's attitude. With his power and status, even the nobles in Rodu would have to be polite to him, let alone an ordinary chef. Yet, this chef dared to talk back to him like this. However, to be able to cook for the king in the Roth Empire's royal palace was an honor that many chefs dreamed of. This fellow would definitely change his attitude immediately, and start licking his boots. "I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't accept the king's decree." Meg pointed to the little blackboard beside him. "Unfortunately, I just took 3 days off. I have to open for business tomorrow. Otherwise, my adorable customers will go berserk." "Huh?" The young knight was stunned. He looked at Meg as if he was looking at an idiot. Not only did this fellow not kneel and lick his boots immediately, he actually rejected the king's invitation. How could anyone reject the king in this world? How could anyone reject the king? "What did you just say?" The young knight felt that he might have heard wrongly. "Please go back. I have to run the restaurant, and have no time to go to the Roth Empire," Meg said calmly. "No time." What a perfunctory reason. This guy actually used such a reason to reject the king's invitation. Do you know what it means to refuse the king's invitation? The young knight drew a long sword from his waist, and pointed it at Mag as he coldly said, "What you have to worry about now is the raging me, not your idiotic customers. You have 2 choices. Come with me or die. Young man, it's better to keep a low profile." Meg looked at the young knight with a complicated expression. "Low profile?" The young knight chuckled and said proudly, "From the moment I became the king's personal guard, a lowly person like you only has the right to look up to me." Bang! A folding chair drew a beautiful parabola in the air and slapped the face of the young knight sitting on the horse. The young knight was slapped to the ground from the back of his horse. A fiery red figure came from afar, leaped high, and stepped on the knight who was struggling to get up. Then, the figure reached out and caught the folding chair that had just fallen to the ground. "It's not good for the Burning Legion to not be able to eat the holy Ruggiamo," Sargeras said seriously. Sargeras said seriously as he looked at the young knight whose face was being pressed to the ground by his foot. The young knight felt as if half of his face had been hit by a speeding carriage. Half of his face was completely numb, and his head was dizzy. The powerful aura that the demon who was stepping on his face gave off made him even more fearful. That was a terrifying power that could easily kill him. "I told you that my guests are not ordinary when they go on a rampage. Do you believe me now? Meg sighed as he looked at the young knight who was being stepped on by Sargeras. However, the gloating tone in his voice made one want to hit him. Do you know who I am, demon? I am the special envoy of the Roth Empire's king. How dare you bully me like this? The Roth Empire will definitely put you on the list of people who must be killed. Let me go now, the young knight shouted angrily. With the Roth Empire and the king as his backing, he had nothing to fear. The king's special envoy? Sargeras frowned. If the Roth Empire set their sights on the Burning Legion, it would indeed be troublesome. In that case, this fellow, Sargeras's gaze turned cold, and he already had a murderous intent. The young knight saw Sargeras hesitate, and thought that he was afraid after hearing about the Roth Empire. He became even more smug as he said, "Enrich, you are just a demon. How dare you defy the king's order? Let me go now, and then kneel down and beg for mercy. If I am happy, I might spare your life." Even Meg couldn't help but admire this brother's courting death. This batch of Roth Empire's knights was not good. How could there be such an arrogant fellow? He still had the illusion that he was the boss even when he was outside the borders of the Roth Empire. If it wasn't for the fact that he was worried that this fellow would die in Chaos City and bring him some trouble, he would have used a kitchen knife to cut open his head. He wanted to see what was inside. Sargeras's expression turned cold. He gripped the folding chair tightly, and was ready to send this blabbermouth on his way. Since when can the people of the Roth Empire come to Chaos City and threaten the citizens of Chaos City as they wish? Right at this moment, an authoritative voice sounded. A black horse-drawn carriage stopped in front of Mammis. The door opened, and Roland walked out. He looked coldly at the young knight who was being stepped on the ground. Sargeras glanced at the person in the horse-drawn carriage. He kept the folding chair and the foot that was stepping on the young knight's face, and retreated to the side. Since the Lord of the Grey Temple was here, there was naturally nothing for him to do. The young knight only felt a terrifying pressure enveloping him. A strong spiritual power was pressing down on him. Although that demon had already retracted his foot, he was still lying on the ground, unable to move an inch. The strong pressure made him almost unable to breathe. Lord of the Grey Temple, Roland. The young knight's heart shuddered violently. This was one of the true rulers of Chaos City, and he was attacking him because of a chef. Lord Roland, I am here on the king's orders to invite the owner of Mammis, Mr. Meg, to Rodu to cook for the palace banquet. I did not mean to offend you. Please forgive me, the young knight quickly said. It was rumored that the city lord of Chaos City was generous and kind, but the Lord of the Grey Temple was ruthless. If he attacked him, it would be justified. Even the king would not say much. Mr. Meg, are you willing to go? Roland looked at Meg. The restaurant is busy. Brave warrior, please inform the king that I am too busy to go, Meg said with a smile. Roland retracted his pressure. He looked at that knight coldly, and said, You have heard what he said. Now, you can get lost. Chapter 1187. Goodbye. That knight sprang up, and quickly got onto his horse before slipping away without looking back. Although he might be punished for failing to complete the mission, he chose to flee rather than risk losing his life if he continued to stay here. What kind of background did this restaurant owner have? He was just an ordinary chef, but the king actually invited him over, and the Lord of the Grey Temple even stepped in to protect him personally. Since it involved someone like the Lord of the Grey Temple, this was not something he could control or participate in. He only needed to send the news back as fast as he could, and then wait for orders from the higher-ups. Meg looked at that departing knight, and cupped his hands at Roland and Sargeras. Thank you, Lord and Director Sargeras, for your help. Hehe, it's nothing. Mr. Mac, you're welcome. We're just here to eat Ruggiamo, Sargeras said with a silly smile. The members of the Burning Legion also smiled foolishly. All of them had shiny bald heads, and looked like gangsters. Mr. Meg is a resident of Chaos City. You have the right to reject the rude requests of the rulers of other countries. The Grey Temple's duty is to protect your rights, Roland said with a serious expression. He glanced at Sargeras, and then at Meg. I wonder if Mr. Meg is free to make a trip to the City Lord's castle now. The City Lord's castle? Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. He didn't expect the people on the hill to act so quickly. He nodded and said, "Since the Lord has invited me, of course I have to go. Director Sargeras, the restaurant is not open today. I'm afraid you won't be able to eat Ruggiamo. Come over earlier tomorrow morning," Meg said to Sargeras. Sargeras should have just returned from the north. He wanted to ask him about the Night Elf's current situation, but since Roland invited him personally, he couldn't just leave him aside, so he could only postpone the meeting. "I see. Then we'll come again tomorrow." Sargeras scratched his head and left with the members of the Burning Legion without saying anything. "Please," Roland said, and got into the black horse-drawn carriage first. Meg locked the door and boarded the carriage. He sat down across from Roland and closed the door. The carriage turned around and drove away. He could barely feel any bumps in the carriage. Roland closed his eyes and didn't say anything. Meg didn't say anything either. He just looked at Roland calmly. This Lord of the Grey Temple, who represented the law of Chaos City, was also a 10th tier magic caster. Just now, he was able to make that knight lie on the ground without being able to move with just his aura. It was evident that he was very powerful. Roland looked very young, probably in his 30s. His long hair was loose, his figure was a little thin, and his face looked ordinary. Even with his eyes closed, he still made people feel awe. Ever since Chaos City was established, he had established the Grey Temple. The City Lord of Chaos City had changed twice, but he was still the Lord of the Grey Temple. His appearance had never changed. There were rumors that he was a demon. There were also rumors that he was a giant dragon. His lifespan was much longer than that of a human's, his eternal appearance, and his strength that had never been tested. This mysterious Lord of the Grey Temple was covered with a veil. In Alex's memories, Mag found some sporadic interactions between him and this Lord, the most memorable of which was when the two of them had clashed outside Chaos City. Alex made a strike with his sword, and Roland only released a spell once. It was a draw. In Alex's life, there were very few draws. It was clear that Roland was very powerful. When they were about to reach the City Lord's castle, Roland suddenly opened his eyes and met Meg's eyes. He narrowed his deep eyes and said in a low voice, "I'm very curious. Who are you?" "I am me. I'm a flower with a different color," Meg almost answered without thinking. He looked into Roland's eyes calmly and said with a smile, "I'm probably just a chef who likes to mess around and think too much." Roland stared into Meg's eyes for a while, and a smile appeared on his serious face. "There are many strange people in Chaos City who want to cut off their past. I'm one of them. So, you don't have to worry about us investigating your past. As long as you admit that you are a resident of Chaos City, that's enough." "That's probably why I like this place," Meg said with a smile. The carriage stopped. Roland stopped smiling and got out. Meg followed him out of the carriage. They were already inside the City Lord's castle. Roland led Meg through a long corridor and came to a quiet courtyard. As soon as he stepped into the courtyard, he felt a powerful spell formation completely enveloping the courtyard. A hint of surprise flashed through Meg's eyes. It seemed that this was an important meeting place in the City Lord's castle. "Roland, Mr. Meg, you're here," City Lord Michael said with a smile as he opened the door to the only room in the courtyard. "City Lord, Principal." Meg followed them into the room. Apart from Michael, Novan was also there. The three big shots of Chaos City had gathered together to talk to him face to face, which showed how important this matter was to them. This room wasn't very big. There was only a round table and 4 stools in the middle of the room. It seemed that this was where the three big shots discussed important matters. Michael sat down and said to Meg, "Have a seat, Mr. Meg. Miss Hill came to talk to us about something. Mr. Meg should know what it is. We're very interested in it, so we want to talk to you face to face." "All right." Meg sat down in the last empty seat. If he wasn't mentally strong enough, he would probably have a heart attack facing the three big shots of Chaos City alone. This conversation lasted for more than 2 hours. Meg told them about his plan to disrupt the internal affairs of the various races so that they would have to give up on their ambition to expand. Although Meg was very confident in his plan, the information he had was too little, and its accuracy had yet to be verified. Hence, he knew that there might be many loopholes in his plan, or there might be a better alternative. However, that was what the three of them had to consider. With Chaos City's power, it wouldn't be difficult to obtain first-hand information. There should be a special department doing that all the time. The three of them listened to Meg's eloquence, nodding and frowning from time to time. When Meg finished, the three of them were looking at Meg in a completely different light. "Mr. Mac, are you really not going to consider joining the City Lord's castle? I've already decided to reserve the position of the Chief Staff Officer for you," Michael said to Meg. "In comparison, I prefer to be a chef." Meg shook his head with a smile. Chapter 1188. Michael looked at Mag with a wistful expression. He nodded and said, "All right, I won't force you. However, I'm really reserving this position for you. You can tell me anytime you want." Meg nodded with a smile, and didn't reject any more. If this world suddenly became chaotic, it might not be a bad choice to hold a position in the City Lord's castle. However, he probably wouldn't work in the City Lord's castle. Was it because he didn't have enough money to spend, or did he have too much time? It would be great to be free and independent. I'm a little curious. Why is Mr. Meg's first goal assisting the Night Elves? At this moment, Roland looked at Meg and asked, "I just received news that the Night Elves, who had been without food for many days, suddenly had food. I wonder if Mr. Meg knows about this." "I know about this. I used to have 3 elven waitresses in my restaurant, but they all joined the Night Elves one after another. After all, they were going home, so I asked them to bring some of the restaurant's specialties back," Meg said calmly. "As for choosing the elves, in public, the elves are the ones who have the most intense internal conflict on the Norland continent. The appearance of the Night Elves is like a sharp knife that tore open the dirty side of the elves' century-old hierarchical policy. As long as the Night Elves aren't destroyed, the Wind Forest will be exhausted from quelling the internal rebellion. They need a stable environment, so they can only vote to renew the contract during the peace talks. In private, those 3 waitresses have worked in the restaurant for many months. We're not just employer and employee, but also very good friends. Naturally, we don't want to see the Night Elves destroyed just like that." Roland nodded slightly, and didn't ask any more questions. Michael looked at Meg and solemnly said, "Mr. Meg, Chaos City was built for peace. Although it's called chaotic, it's actually a city of peace. We're willing to see a peaceful Norland continent, which is in line with your vision. The plan you mentioned just now has given us a lot of inspiration, and also provided us with a way to change the direction of the world. So, I hope you can join us. Even if you don't work in the City Lord's castle, you can still participate in the decision-making as a senior consultant." "Are you willing?" "Senior consultant?" Meg hesitated. "What do I have to do for this position? What responsibility?" Michael said, "If Mr. Meg agrees, we will give you the first-hand information, and at the same time, let you participate in the high-level meeting and participate in the formulation and decision-making of this plan. Mr. Meg has to keep all the information confidential, and promise to be loyal to Chaos City." Meg frowned and pondered. In this case, he could perfectly solve the problem of his sources of information. He didn't need to spend a lot of money to buy seriously outdated and completely inaccurate information from the House of Everything. Furthermore, since Meg had found his way to the hill, he was planning to work with Buffett Banks and Chaos City to do something. As a restaurant owner, all he could do was secretly transport some food to the Night Elves. "If that's the case, I'm willing to be your consultant." Meg nodded. "For your safety, only the 3 of us know of your identity. Every day, there will be a special person who will send you the news to the restaurant. When there's a need for a meeting, someone will come to invite you," Michael said. "I want to understand the situation of the various races more comprehensively. I wonder if the City Lord can give me a set of detailed information. It would be best if it could be detailed to the relationship between the various races' higher-ups." Meg wanted to have a good understanding of the relationship between the various races. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy would you be able to win every battle. I'll get someone to send it to you tonight. Michael nodded. Meg left the City Lord's castle in an ordinary horse-drawn carriage. In the secret chamber, Michael asked Roland, do you think Mr. Mac looks like him? His form and eyes are somewhat similar, but his speech habits and mannerisms are completely different. I'm sure they're not the same person. Roland shook his head. Although Alex has reappeared and proved that his power is still at its peak during the rainy night in Rodu, he has always been wearing a mask, and no one has seen his real face. Furthermore, he has repeatedly expressed his closeness to Chaos City, but he doesn't interact with us. Could he really have changed a lot after that incident? Novan asked. I've just used my spiritual power to scan his body. Although he's stronger than normal people, it should be because he's been working in the kitchen every day. There's nothing special about him. His skin is smooth, and there are calluses from swords. Roland still shook his head. Actually, all these aren't important. Do you think Alex can become a genius chef after disappearing for 3 years? It's not like you don't know the taste of his food. He's a talent that even King Andre wants, Michael said with a smile. Roland and Novan nodded thoughtfully upon hearing that. Culinary skills were the same as swordsmanship, they couldn't be mastered overnight. Mag was so young, yet he was already so proficient in culinary skills, so he must have practiced for a long time. Mr. Mac's plan is already very mature, but the situation is changing every minute and every second. Many of them are no longer useful, and we still need to spend some time to revise them. However, just like what he said, interfering with the Wind Forest's encirclement of the Night Elves should be the easiest thing to do now. Meg didn't go home directly after leaving the City Lord's castle. Instead, he alighted from the horse-drawn carriage midway, and walked to the Burning Legion's base. Director Sargeras, this is the reward for this mission. Meg passed a banknote to Sargeras. The Burning Legion had not let him down. They had delivered Firis and the food safely, and brought precious time to the Night Elves. Moreover, according to Sargeras, although the Night Elves were being encircled, they should still be able to hold their own for a while. Sargeras took the banknote, and everyone from the Burning Legion was full of smiles. This was 1,000 Rugiamos, which was enough for them to eat for a while. Although this escort was tough, it was worth it. Sargeras kept the banknote, and patted his chest as he said, Mr. Mac, if you need anything from the Burning Legion in the future, just let us know. The Burning Legion's excellent service makes it impossible for me to find another company, Meg said with a smile. There would be more and more opportunities to use them in the future. He liked to deal with honest and capable people, and the Burning Legion was perfect for this. After leaving the Burning Legion's courtyard, Meg walked away. Just as he was about to turn into another alley, a petite figure dashed into his arms. Chapter 1189. Meg looked at the young girl in front of him who was only at his chest height. She had a head of slightly curly flaxen hair and was stunned for a moment. Her petite figure did not match the huge and soft body he received from his hands. This sudden ball bump was really unexpected. The young girl lowered her head and looked at the 2 hands on her chest. She was also stunned for a moment. Then, she suddenly looked up at Meg. Her messy curly hair parted to the sides, revealing a fair and delicate face. The little freckles on her nose made her face look lively. Her blue-grey eyes were filled with shame and anger. Her 2 pinkish-white beast ears suddenly stood up like kitten ears. It was actually a little cute. She was wearing a thin cotton linen blouse. Her right hand was still holding half a biscuit. There was a lot of dust on her body as if she had just rolled on the ground. Bastard, are you still not going to let go? The cat-eared young girl said angrily. Meg quickly retracted his hands and said embarrassedly, I'm sorry. Miss, you ran in a hurry. I was caught off guard, over here. At this moment, a series of hurried footsteps came from the alley behind them. It was rapidly approaching in this direction. Shut up. Kiss me. The cat-eared young girl looked back in panic. She reached out her hand to cover Meg's mouth and ordered anxiously. Then, she turned around and leaned against the corner of the wall. She grabbed Meg's collar and pulled him down. Meg's face was suddenly in front of her, almost kissing her thin lips. However, Just as the four lips were about to touch, Meg raised his hand and pressed against the wall behind the young girl. He looked at the young girl who had closed her eyes and looked like she was facing death calmly. He raised his eyebrows slightly. What's going on now? Are all young girls nowadays so open? However, from the cat-eared young girl's reaction, he could guess something. It seemed like someone was chasing her. This was an inexplicably familiar scene. Right at this moment, a group of people had already rushed out from the alley next door. Meg turned sideways slightly and unbuttoned his coat. The coat spread to both sides and wrapped around the cat-eared young girl. Meg lowered his head and pressed against the wall with one hand. Their faces were almost touching. From the outside, they looked like a pair of lovers kissing passionately. That group of people slowed down when they passed by Meg. They stared at Meg's back for a while. The woman wrapped in the coat could not see anything. Chaos City was really open. Soon, they sped up again. Someone shouted in a low voice, "Hurry up and catch up. If we let her escape, the chief will definitely not let us go." After everyone left, Mag tilted his head slightly to take a look. That was a group of orcs. The leader had already reached the 8th tier, and the rest were all 6th tier and 7th tier orcs. Why was such a powerful group of orcs chasing after this cat-eared maiden? The chief was the name of the leader of the orc tribe. What did this have to do with the orcs? Connie closed her eyes tightly. The disgusting, sticky kiss that she expected did not come. She was a little surprised. This human man who had just taken advantage of her was obviously not a good person. How could he not take advantage of her? However, the sound of hurried footsteps approaching made her hold her breath. She did not dare to move. If she was caught by them, she would definitely be killed like her father. No one would be able to go back to save her brother. She had to live on and become stronger. Although he didn't kiss her, the warm breath from his nose that was almost touching her face gently blew on her face, making her blush instantly. He didn't have the pungent smell of sweat on ordinary orcs. Instead, there was a faint fragrance that smelled good. Do all human men have this strange fragrance? Connie was full of doubts. The coat that wrapped around her was so warm, and the man who was so close to her was like a big furnace that chased away the cold. She had run for more than 10 days in a world of ice and snow. She did not have warm clothes, nor did she dare to sleep well. She started running every day as soon as she opened her eyes. She was almost caught several times. Even in this place called the City of Freedom, she still could not find a place that could accommodate her. But now, this warm embrace made her flustered heart calm down. She felt strangely at ease. Meg made sure that the orcs had run far away. He retracted his gaze and looked at the cat-eared young girl who was leaning against the wall. Her hands were tightly holding the half-covered cake in front of her. Her eyes were still tightly shut. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly, but her mouth was slightly pouting. What is she expecting? Meg narrowed his eyes and looked at the young girl's slightly pouting mouth. Her cherry lips were very cute. It was just that they lacked some color. Because of the dryness, they were a little peeled. This would greatly affect the kissing experience. As a proper person, this was of course not the reason why Meg did not kiss her. Was he such a casual person? Even when Irina had pushed him down, he had at least put up a symbolic resistance. They've gone far away. Meg retracted his arm and straightened up. He looked at the cat-eared young girl and said. The warmth was immediately replaced by coldness. That faint fragrance also dissipated. Connie shivered. Her heart felt empty. She opened her eyes and looked at the empty alley. Then, she looked up at Meg. If one took a closer look, this man was actually quite good-looking. His handsome face was chiseled like a knife, and the 2 wisps of mustache on his upper lip added a bit of mature charm. His gaze was as gentle as water, and this tall human man had just used his own body to save her. Wait. Even if that was the case, it could only offset his rudeness to her. Moreover, her mother said that good-looking men were all liars. Then this man must be a big liar. At that thought, Connie looked at Meg with a wary gaze. Are you cold? Meg asked. How? How did you know? Connie was shocked. She stared at Meg with her eyes wide open. Could this man read minds? He actually knew that she was cold. Meg was speechless as he looked at Connie, who was shivering from the cold. Any normal person would be able to tell. Why did she look as if he had seen through her? Why were those people chasing you? Meg continued to ask. How did you know that they were chasing me? Connie was even more shocked. She immediately grabbed the dagger in her sleeve and looked at Meg cautiously. If they weren't chasing you, were they chasing me? Meg rolled his eyes. He felt that there was no way to continue this conversation. He turned around and prepared to leave. His leaving just like that. Connie heaved a sigh of relief. However, looking at Meg's back, she felt an inexplicable sense of loss. That hug just now was really warm and comforting. Meg took a few steps and sighed softly. He turned around and walked back to Connie. He took off his coat and draped it over the confused Connie. He said, "Come with me. You're so damn gentle." Chapter 1190. Connie was wearing a warm coat as she followed behind Meg with a confused expression. Home of beating _new thinking loo Chinese web _new website . She didn't know why she was following a man whom she had just met. She didn't even know his name or what kind of man he was. Perhaps it was because she had nowhere else to go, and his clothes were so warm. Even though she didn't know anything, she felt like trusting him. Of course, the biggest possibility was that he had thrown away half of the pancake that she had snatched from the big dog's mouth with much difficulty, and said that he would take her to eat something delicious. She was really too hungry. Good-looking men were all big liars indeed. He had managed to trick her so easily. The long coat almost reached her ankles, completely enveloping her. It even had his body temperature and fragrance. This was the most comfortable moment she had been in over 10 days. After exiting the alley, Meg flagged down a horse-drawn carriage and brought Connie into the carriage. They went straight back to the restaurant. "Is this your palace?" Connie exclaimed in shock as she alighted from the carriage and looked at the splendid restaurant. This man had an inexplicable domineering aura when he spoke. Perhaps he was the chief of a human tribe. "This is my restaurant. Come in." Meg opened the door and said to Connie. "The restaurant." Connie's eyes lit up, and she quickly walked into the restaurant. Warmth enveloped her as soon as she entered. The restaurant was like a different world from the outside. It was as if she was being roasted. "It's so warm." A smile appeared on Connie's face. She looked at the beautiful decorations in the restaurant in amazement. Even though it wasn't gold like her home, it made her feel very comfortable. "Have a seat. I'll get you some water," Meg said casually. He looked at the information given to him by the omniscient door in his mind. This cat-eared girl was an orc. She was a little different from the orcs with dark green skin that Meg remembered. However, the orc race was made up of hundreds of tribes of different sizes. They were called orcs because they had some magical beast characteristics. It wasn't strange that they had different characteristics. Meg walked towards the kitchen and soon came out with a cup of warm water, looking at the cat-eared girl standing in front of the Twilight Forest mural. She had already taken off her coat and placed it on a chair at the side. She stared at the mural in a daze. Her eyes were red and she pursed her lips as if she didn't want her tears to flow out. Meg stared at her for a while, then gently put the cup on the table beside her and turned to go into the kitchen. Not long after, a fragrant aroma drifted out from the kitchen. "It smells so good." Connie, who was standing in front of the mural with red eyes, sniffed, and her eyes lit up. She couldn't help but turn her head to look in the direction of the kitchen, where the alluring aroma was coming from. What is he doing? Connie's stomach was growling. She hadn't eaten anything for 3 days. When she was hungry, she would eat a handful of snow. After smelling the aroma, she couldn't control her body and walked towards the kitchen door. Mag, who was wearing an apron, had his back facing the door. He was shaking the iron pot in his hand, and colorful ingredients were tumbling around in the pot. They leaped high into the air like a long rainbow, and that was where the alluring aroma was coming from. There was another iron pot on the other side of the stove, but it was covered with a lid. She couldn't tell what was cooking inside. "So he's a chef." Connie looked at Meg strangely. She didn't expect that when he said he was going to take her to dinner, he was going to cook for her. Meg turned off the fire and put the Yeongju fried rice on a plate. He took a spoon and turned around with the tray. Looking at Connie, who was standing at the door, he said, "Have a plate of Yeongju fried rice first. The rest isn't ready yet." "Okay," Connie answered, but her eyes were completely attracted by the Yeongju fried rice. Mag carried the tray to the table where the cup was placed earlier. He put down the fried rice and reached out 2 fingers to grab Connie's wrist when she was about to reach for the spoon. He shook his head and said, "Wash your hands first before you eat." Connie looked at her dirty hands and said in surprise, "Why are my hands so dirty?" "These are your hands." Meg was speechless. He pulled her into the kitchen and turned on the faucet. "What's this? Why is there a transparent liquid flowing out when you touch it?" Connie looked at the faucet in surprise. "This is the faucet. It's water flowing out." Meg raised his eyebrows. What a terrible line. The faucet. Connie jumped 2 steps back as she stared at Mag in shock. Her voice trembled as she said, "You actually twisted the giant dragon's head off and put it in the kitchen. Then what's flowing out of its mouth is saliva." Meg stared at Connie for a while and suddenly had the urge to throw this retarded girl out. "Wash your hands and eat," Meg said as calmly as possible. Connie looked at the fried rice on the table outside. Her stomach was protesting. She looked at the silver faucet again. Although she didn't know how Meg made the head of a giant dragon so thin and long, her fear was overcome by her hunger. She went up reluctantly and touched the cool water. "It's warm." Connie pulled her hand back and looked even more shocked. This giant dragon isn't cold yet." "Yes. Warm water is just right for winter. So every time I want to use water, I kill it right away." A cruel smile appeared on Meg's face. Connie's eyes widened and she immediately shut her mouth. This guy is too scary. He has to kill a giant dragon every day just to get warm water. "I'm sorry, Master Giant Dragon. I didn't do it on purpose. I was forced to do it," Connie said in her mind and reluctantly washed her hands with warm water. Meg turned on the faucet. Connie could go out now. Connie quickly walked out of the kitchen. She looked at the door, but her eyes were soon attracted by the bowl of Yeongju fried rice on the table. Grumble Tilda hearing the growling of her stomach, Connie sat at the table helplessly. She sneaked a glance at the kitchen and said to herself, "I'll sneak away after I finish this. This is definitely not a human, but a scary demon. I have to stay away from him, or I'll be eaten up." Then she picked up the spoon and scooped up a spoonful of Yeongju fried rice. The egg aroma hit her in the face. The rice was wrapped in a golden egg. The grains were clear, and all the ingredients were cut to the size of rice grains. Back in the tribe, she ate big pieces of meat every day, roasted or boiled. She had never seen food cooked so beautifully. Father said we should eat meat in big bites. Will it really taste good if it's cut so small? Connie put the fried rice into her mouth with a doubtful attitude. The egg melted in her mouth. The winter bamboo shoots and green beans were crispy and delicious. The rice wrapped in the egg was sweet after being chewed. The soft ham was mixed into the rice, and there seemed to be the taste of shrimp. All kinds of flavors were contained in this one bite. Her mouth, which had been tasteless for the past few days, was suddenly awakened. Her taste buds were reveling in this wonderful taste. After swallowing, the fried rice turned into a warm current that flowed into her stomach. Connie felt warm all over. Her hungry stomach was gently comforted, and then she had an even stronger desire to eat. "Wow! This is so delicious," Connie couldn't help but praise. She picked up the spoon and scooped another spoonful of rice into her mouth, chewing happily. Whispering in the Underworld. Chapter 1191. The delicious Yeongju fried rice catered to her taste buds crazily and soothed her hungry stomach. Bite after bite, it was so delicious that she couldn't stop. Connie had completely thrown all thoughts of being a beast in human face and a dragon killer to the back of her mind. All that was left in her head was the delicious Yeongju fried rice. Ding! The spoon hit the bottom of the empty bowl and made a soft sound. Connie looked at the empty plate in front of her and muttered in shock, Oh my God. I actually finished a plate of food given to me by a stranger, and it was made by a dragon killer to boot. Looking at the remaining 2 grains of rice on the plate, her eyes widened as she watched her uncontrollable hand pick up the plate and lick the bottom of the bowl with her tongue. The 2 grains of rice were sucked into her mouth with a slurp. It smells so good. A voice sounded in her heart. Who are you? Why are you in my body? Connie widened her eyes and didn't want to admit that it was her own heart. If I didn't make it, I would have forgotten what you were eating. Meg walked out with a tray and couldn't help but complain when he saw that the plate was licked clean. Not even a drop of egg was left on it. I. Connie's face reddened. She opened her mouth but didn't know how to refute. She stole a glance at Meg. Although this man is quite good-looking, he's not a good person. He even twisted the head of a water hose off to spray water. Would he be interested in my head too? Meg put a big plate in front of Connie and opened the lid. The spicy and sour aroma of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers wafted over along with the steam. Connie, who was thinking about how to escape from the devil's claws, fell into the trap again. Oh my God! What is this aroma? How can it be so tempting? Connie blinked and tried to see through the mist to see what was on the plate. The first thing she saw was a field of red chili. The chopped chili covered the entire plate and she couldn't see what was underneath. Is this for me too? Connie looked at Meg uncertainly and asked. I'm not hungry now, and you're the only one in the restaurant. Meg nodded. He only wanted to give this cat-eared young lady some brain supplements so that they could have a normal conversation. Otherwise, it would be too tiring to talk to her. He's so good to me. Is he really a good person? Connie sized Meg up carefully. She thought of the faucet in the kitchen, and shook her head in her heart. Maybe he was only interested in a certain part of my body, and wanted to give me a good meal before sending me on my way. She wanted to run. However, when he looked at the delicious food in front of him, he couldn't move his feet. If the fried rice from before could be described as a gentle comfort, then this bright red delicacy was like a strong man, violently pressing her under his body. Her heart was against it, but it was so sour and spicy that it almost exploded in an instant. Her taste buds, which had just been comforted by the Yangju fried rice, were waiting delicately at the side. Suddenly, she felt a loud and warm slap. Connie's face flushed red instantly. The tingling sensation spread from the tip of her tongue to her entire body, as though countless ants were crawling over her body. It felt as though something was about to crawl out of her body. That numbing sensation made her body tremble slightly. Her cherry lips parted slightly, and she let out a cry. Rip. Almost at the same time, the sound of cloth tearing was heard. Connie's tattered cotton blouse had an obvious tear at the collar. The tear extended downwards, revealing a beautiful arc. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that customers with a big heart weren't suitable to eat this steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Today's fish head was big and round. Connie, whose face was flushed red, didn't notice it at all. Spicy. Connie, who had never eaten chili before, felt her mind go blank. After a moment of intense impact, her taste buds fell. After being ravaged, she felt a faint sense of loss. Then, she controlled her brain and drove the hand holding the chopsticks to pick up another piece of chopped chili and put it into her mouth. The sourness and spiciness wreaked havoc again. The discomfort at the beginning had disappeared. Instead, there was a feeling of pleasant surprise that made her taste buds go wild again. One mouthful of chopped chili, and another mouthful of chopped chili. After being ravaged, her taste buds were still enthusiastically cheering for the next round of attack. This is a fish head. Meg looked at Connie, who was crazily eating the chopped chili. His expression was complicated. He wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say. 5 minutes later, Connie put the last piece of chopped chili into her mouth. She chewed and swallowed, and let out a long sigh of satisfaction. Her clothes were already soaked in sweat. This feeling of fullness was simply too satisfying. Then, she looked at the plate and saw the neatly arranged fish head. She said in surprise, why is there a fish head here? This dish is called steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Most people eat fish heads. I didn't expect you to choose chopped chili. Meg looked at Connie with a complicated expression. You're really a genius. You're eating a fish head. Connie's expression was even more surprised. I think that chopped chili is delicious too. Then she looked down and finally saw her torn and open neckline. Ah! She let out a scream and covered her collar. Then, she looked at Meg with a panicked expression. You! What did you do to me while I was eating? I've been standing here the whole time. What do you think I did to you? Meg spread his hands. That's true. Connie was stunned. Although she was very engrossed in eating, Meg didn't come close to her, nor did he do anything strange to her. Could it be that this shirt is too tattered, so it tore when I wasn't paying attention? Connie thought in her heart. Her gaze couldn't help but fall on the fish head on the plate again. After a serious observation, she exclaimed again, "Why does this fish only have a fish head?" This dish is called steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Meg pursed his lips. This girl was so flustered that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Water faucet, fish head. Connie's gaze gradually became frightened as she looked at Meg. Could he be a head fetish? Could it be that this man brought her back just to take her head? At that thought, Connie's expression collapsed, and she cried on the spot. Don't kill me. My head doesn't taste good at all, and I don't know how to spray water. It's useless even if you put my head in the kitchen. Chapter 1192. Meg looked at Connie, who was crying so pitifully that her two pink cat ears were trembling. She was about to kneel down in front of him, and he felt a little embarrassed. Although this girl was a little stupid, she was actually kind of adorable. But, did he really look that scary? Wasn't his previous performance the perfect image of a warm and caring man? He pinned the hero against the wall to save the damsel in distress, put on a coat in the cold, poured tea to warm her, and even cooked for her. This kind of man, other than Mammis, was hard to find. But this girl was actually scared to tears. Alright, for a girl with a hole in her brain who couldn't understand the value of a rare and excellent man, there was no need to be upset. And from her illogical begging, he roughly understood that she was probably traumatized by him because of the faucet. Meg was speechless. What can I do? It's called a faucet. Alright, I'm not interested in your head. After all, I'm afraid that I'll be poisoned if I eat it. Meg reached out to pull up Connie, who was about to fall to the ground, and threw her back onto the chair. He smiled helplessly. Really? Connie stopped crying, but still looked at Meg suspiciously. I'm Meg, the owner of this restaurant. This is a proper restaurant, not some scam. Meg nodded, and pulled out a chair to sit across from Connie. He looked at her and said, also, the most worthless part of your body is that head of yours. Then, you're interested in me? Connie pulled her clothes tight, and asked in fear. It's fine. I'm not interested in you. I'm afraid that my descendants will have no descendants because of their low IQ. Meg sighed. This stupid girl was really something. Then I'm relieved. Connie heaved a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on her face again. What's your name? Why were those orcs chasing you just now? Meg looked at Connie, who had picked up her chopsticks again, and asked. My name is Connie. I came from the Twilight Forest. Those were bad guys. They wanted to capture me and hand me over to a big bad guy. Connie said weakly. She seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes suddenly turned red. Although what she said was basically equivalent to not saying anything, Mag didn't have the heart to continue asking after seeing how sad she was. He stood up and said, if you're still hungry, you can continue eating. I'll make some noodles for you. Okay. Connie responded, and looked at Meg, who was walking towards the kitchen. Judging from this, he didn't seem like a bad guy. Her gaze landed on the fish in front of her again. The tender, white fish looked very tempting. The fish in their tribe were usually roasted, and they didn't eat the fish head. She didn't expect someone to use fish head to cook. She picked up a piece of fish and put it into her mouth. The tender fish slid into her mouth, and the spicy and sour taste of chopped peppers entered her mouth. The tender fish head melted in her mouth when she bit into it gently. The delicate texture and fresh taste were incomparable to any other roasted fish she had eaten before. She felt as if she was a fish that had jumped into a large pond filled with chopped red peppers. She warmly welcomed the wonderful taste. "This fish head is so delicious." Connie opened her eyes in surprise and put another piece of fish into her mouth. She didn't have to worry about bones, and only needed to carefully savor the wonderful taste of the fish. He can't be a bad guy if he can make such delicious food, right? Connie took time to look in the direction of the kitchen, and thought to herself with more certainty. When Connie almost finished eating the fish head, Meg came out with a bowl of rice noodles. There was no soup in the rice noodles, and only a handful of chopped green onions were sprinkled on it. He scooped a few spoonfuls of red soup from the plate of steamed fish head with chopped hot red peppers and poured it over the rice noodles. The white rice noodles were immediately dyed red, and the spicy and sour aroma filled her nose. "Eat." Meg put the rice noodles in front of Connie. "Thank you," Connie said gratefully. She hadn't had a full meal since the rebellion happened and she fled alone. Meg, whom she met by chance and didn't know at all, made such a delicious and substantial meal for her. She was really touched. The rice noodles were soaked in the spicy and sour soup, and were extremely refreshing. It was a perfect match. With a slight slurping sound, the bowl of rice noodles was quickly emptied into Connie's stomach. Connie burped and showed a satisfied smile. The feeling of being full was so blissful. All of this was like a dream, and she was suddenly afraid that she would wake up like this. How could something like this happen? When she was at her wit's end, a handsome man suddenly appeared and saved her. Then, he brought her home and made her a delicious meal. Am I really dreaming? How could there be such delicious food in the real world? Connie thought to herself with melancholy. It seemed that she was really starving, and could only have a good meal in her dream. She even dreamed of such a perfect man. She looked up at Meg, and suddenly felt much more relaxed. Since it was her dream, then there was no need to be nervous. "Thank you for making so much delicious food for me." Connie looked at Meg, and slowly stood up. She said as she unbuttoned her shirt, "Father said that as a beastman, one must know how to repay kindness. But I have nothing on me now, and can't use anything to repay you. I can only use this virginity that I've treasured for 16 years. Meg looked at Connie, who had already unbuttoned half of her torn shirt, and reached out to flick her forehead. He was a little speechless. "I say, what are you doing? Ouch. It hurts." Connie covered her forehead and took a step back. She looked at Meg pitifully. Why did you hit me?" "Hey, it hurts. That means. This isn't my dream." Connie reacted immediately. She looked at her slightly unbuttoned shirt, and her face reddened. She hurriedly tightened her shirt, and was completely flustered. "Oh my God. This is actually real. I'm not dreaming. What did I just do? What should I do?" Connie wanted to find a hole to hide in. It was really too embarrassing. If this woman didn't have a brain, she could really do anything. Meg sighed inwardly. He wasn't going to care about this woman anymore. His heart was tired. Ding. New mission. In order to bring a better dining experience to the customers, and to serve those customers who can't dine in the restaurant due to special reasons, please activate the restaurant's takeout authority, and recruit a delivery person as soon as possible. The first order must be completed within 2 days. Mission reward, 1 recipe for Mandarin duck hot pot. Punishment for mission failure, 1 strength point. At this moment, the system's voice sounded in Meg's mind. If you want to talk about Daddy's Otherworld restaurant with more like-minded people, follow excellent reading literature on WeChat. Talk about life, find a confidant Tilda. Chapter 1193. Takeout. Meg raised his eyebrows. Although winter had arrived, the hot pot was late, and the reward was extremely tempting, but what was the point of providing takeout orders? System, didn't you always emphasize that a master chef must have some class? Isn't delivering takeout lowering my class? Have you ever seen a Michelin 3-star restaurant deliver takeout? Meg pursed his lips. Furthermore, I'm already busy enough receiving customers, and there are many customers who can't even get a bite. Where would I find the energy and time to do takeout? Host, this takeout is not a casual order, but a humanitarian one. Under the premise that it doesn't affect the normal operation of the restaurant, we provide limited takeout services for customers who can't come to the restaurant in person. At the same time, we charge a certain amount for the delivery. Outside of the limited space, we expand the territory of the restaurant and gain more praise. The system said seriously. I can order the takeout dishes myself? Meg asked tentatively. This is up to the host's discretion. The 2-day countdown begins. Host, please recruit riders as soon as possible and start the business of takeout in another world. The system said briskly. Takeout riders. Mag looked up and saw Connie, who had already tiptoed to the restaurant's entrance. Her petite back view was only wearing a thin shirt, which had just been torn apart. It was a world of ice and snow outside, and a bunch of ferocious orcs were looking for her. Mag actually felt a little uneasy about letting her out like this. I say, Meg said. Hearing his voice, Connie stopped in her tracks. The blush on her face had not faded, and she panicked. Did he take it for real? But this wasn't a dream, she had kept her virginity for 16 years. Did she really have to give it to him just to repay the favor of this meal? Although he was quite handsome and the food was delicious, if he could cook such delicious food for her every day, letting him sleep with her would be, no. Connie quickly shook her head and chased this shameful thought out of her mind. She still had to go back to save her brother and avenge her father. How could she let herself be trapped here just because of a delicious meal? Mother said that men are bad. I have to stay away from them. If I get kissed, I'll get pregnant. I can't get pregnant so easily. Do you have anywhere to go? Meg looked at Connie, who was frozen at the door, and asked. No. Connie answered instinctively. However, she regretted it as soon as she answered. Could Mag be testing her? After knowing that she had nowhere to go, he forced her to stay and lock her up in a dark room. The restaurant needs to recruit an employee. Do you want to give it a try? Mag didn't bother to guess what was going on in her head, and went straight to the point. Employee? Connie was stunned for a moment. She said nervously, You mean to be your servant? She'll do everything. And be done by you. Mag was speechless. What kind of person was this? Was he that kind of person? But could he still recruit this kind of employee? Where could he recruit her? No. Meg rubbed his forehead. He felt that he was being led astray by this fellow. At the same time, he had great doubts about his rash decision. Perhaps it wasn't a wise choice to keep this fellow. Meg calmed himself down and explained, Employee refers to the staff of the restaurant. Some employees are responsible for taking orders from the customers, some are responsible for cleaning, and some are responsible for preparing the ingredients. They all have their own responsibilities. Do you have many employees? Connie cried out. Then how do you arrange for them to sleep? I said. The employees of the restaurant aren't responsible for sleeping with me, Meg couldn't help but say to her. Connie shrunk her neck and said weakly, You didn't say. All right, you can go now. Meg looked like he had nothing left to live for. He decided to take back his reckless decision. If I don't have to sleep with you, will you give me food every day? Or give me that gold coin? Connie asked softly after some serious thought. She had been in Chaos City for 2 days now. Chaos City was so big, but she couldn't find a place to stay. She had curled up under the bridge to sleep the night before, and was even bitten by a rat in the middle of the night. She was most afraid of rats. It seemed that the restaurant was quite clean, so there shouldn't be any rats. If she could sleep on the ground for the night, that would be pretty good. Moreover, after leaving the tribe, she realized that the outside world only recognized things like gold coins. No matter what it was necessary to have gold coins. It was a good thing. I think you're not suitable for this job. Meg shook his head coldly. Why? I can do anything other than sleep with you, Connie said confidently. I think you're too stupid. Meg still shook his head. War. Connie's pinkish-white cat ears drooped, and tears began to flow down her cheeks. Her shoulders shook as if she had been greatly wronged. "What are you doing?" Meg raised an eyebrow. He didn't expect this simple-minded girl to know how to use tears to gain sympathy. However, he hated people who acted pitiful the most. This only made him more certain of his decision. This kind of employee who only wanted to solve problems by crying, "Why don't I sleep with you? You just have to feed me. I'm very easy to feed, and I don't eat much." Connie grabbed Meg's arm and pressed herself against him. Her two soft lumps squeezed against Meg's arm until they were distorted. "Stop, stop, stop." Meg hurriedly stopped this stupid girl. He pressed her head and pushed her back 1/2 meter. It seemed that he had underestimated her. Her way of solving problems was quite unique. Looking at the weeping cat-eared girl, with her IQ, she would probably be abducted the moment she stepped out of the house. Moreover, she would be the kind of person who would laugh and count the money for the person who sold her. "You have 3 days of probation. Prove to me that you're worthy of me keeping you. Otherwise, you still have to leave. After you're officially hired, I'll pay you and guarantee your safety," Meg said with a serious face. "Okay." Connie nodded. She wiped her tears and looked at Meg excitedly. "So, what should I do now?" Meg glanced at Connie's clothes that were full of holes and had a large tear in front of her chest. She was also sweaty because she hadn't bathed for many days. He frowned slightly and said, "Go take a shower first." So soon?" Connie was a little nervous. "It's my first time." Chapter 1194. First time my ass. Meg flicked her forehead. What on earth was in there? He turned and walked upstairs as he said, "I'm worried that the customers will complain about the smell on you. The staff of the restaurant must ensure that they are dressed neatly and don't have any smell, so that the customers won't have a bad dining experience." "I see." Connie looked like she finally understood. She followed Meg upstairs. "I'll get you a set of work clothes. Red, yellow, blue. Which color do you like?" Meg asked. "I like blue. It's the color of the sky." Connie answered quickly. "Okay." Meg nodded slightly. He went upstairs and took Connie to the bathroom first. What a big faucet. Connie stood at the door of the bathroom. She looked at the shower head with fear. Then she saw several more faucets. She became even more nervous. Was Mr. Meg really a water dragon killer? "This is the switch for the shower. After you turn it on, there will be warm water. This is shampoo and shower gel. The red one is to wet your hair and then apply it. It can wash off the stains on your hair. After you're done, rinse off the foam with water. The black one is to clean your body. After you apply it to your body, rinse it off with water too," Meg explained. He looked back at Connie and asked, "Do you understand?" Yes. Connie nodded. She swallowed her saliva secretly and said, "But, do you really want me to face so many faucets alone? I'm a bit scared. Can you take a shower with me?" "No." Meg refused coldly. He wasn't stupid if she wanted to trick him into giving her a free shower. "I'll put your clothes on the stool by the door. You can take them when you're done. I'll be downstairs in a bit." Meg walked out of the bathroom sideways. "Please, don't leave me here alone." Connie grabbed the corner of Meg's clothes and said pitifully. There were 4 faucets in a small room. It was too scary. "My restaurant doesn't accept customers with strange odors." Meg took back the corner of his shirt from Connie's hand and closed the bathroom door. He couldn't help but mutter, "Does the Orc tribe have a tradition of men and women bathing together?" Once the bathroom door closed, Connie was left alone. She leaned against the door and looked nervously at the 4 taps in the bathroom. The bathroom was very large, and the temperature was very warm. There was a large white tub in the innermost part, which seemed to be used for bathing. I was forced to do this. I didn't mean to offend you. Please don't blame me. Don't scare me. I'll just take a quick shower." Connie put her hands together and said to the faucet and the shower head sincerely. Then, she turned around and saw herself in the mirror. "Ah, what is this? Why does it illuminate my beauty so clearly?" Connie looked at the mirror and was stunned. Even a crystal mirror couldn't see her as clearly as this one. However, she soon realized that her face, neck, and arms were stained with sweat and mud. She had been running for her life for more than 10 days, and she didn't have time to take a shower. She sniffed carefully and realized that there was indeed a sour smell on her body. Oh my God! Is this the smell coming from my body? Connie's face fell, and she quickly took off her clothes. She looked up at the shower head that was much bigger than a normal faucet, and said apologetically, "Lord Dragon, I'll just borrow some of your water. If you can't rest in peace, please go and find the boss." Then, she turned on the switch. Warm water sprayed out from the shower head and dripped down from the top of her head, wetting her hair and body. Meow Tilda, she couldn't help but let out a soft moan from the comfortable feeling. As the hot water washed over her body, the fatigue that had accumulated along the way quickly disappeared. "It's so comfortable." Connie couldn't help but praise. The hot steam quickly filled the entire bathroom, and her fair skin turned pink. She washed the stains off her body. He said that this is for washing hair, and this is for washing body. Why is he using this strange liquid? After taking a hot shower, Connie's gaze fell on the shampoo and shower gel at the side. She hesitated for a moment, but still reached out and pressed the lid like Meg had taught her. A milky white liquid sprayed out and splashed all over her face. Oh! Connie instinctively closed her eyes and touched the liquid on her face with her hand. It was slippery, sticky, and strange to the touch. However, there was a very special fragrance, like the fragrance of flowers. It was refreshing and pleasant, and it didn't feel greasy at all. It felt a little familiar. Is this shampoo? Connie looked at the lotion in her hand and wiped it on her head. She scratched it casually, and it turned into many white bubbles. Wow, there are really bubbles. Connie's eyes lit up. She put the white bubbles to her mouth and blew gently. She smiled as she watched the bubbles fall. After washing her hair, she tried the shower gel. The shower gel was slippery on her body, and many bubbles appeared with a gentle rub. After washing, her entire body exuded a faint fragrance. Oh, I know, this is the smell on Mr. Meg's body. Connie's eyes lit up. The sour smell on her body had completely disappeared. Her hair and body were clean, and her delicate skin was white with a hint of red. Looking at herself in the mirror, she couldn't help but want to take a bite. Am I really that ugly? Why isn't Mr. Meg even interested in sleeping with me? Or is it because I'm too young? Connie looked at herself in the mirror and sighed in self-pity. She was deeply hurt. Oh right, he said he prepared clothes for me. What kind of clothes will they be? Connie thought expectantly. She hadn't worn warm clothes since leaving the tribe. She didn't want a pretty dress now, but a set of warm and comfortable clothes. Standing beside the door, her cat ears twitched. After confirming that there was no one outside, she carefully opened the bathroom door. Just as the door opened a crack, she saw a small stool placed at the entrance. On top of the stool was a set of sky blue clothes. On top of the stool was a piece of paper with words and pictures. Wow, it's the color of the sky. Connie's eyes lit up, and she reached out to pick up the clothes and the paper. The correct way to wear a bra. Connie read softly, and then took out a small piece of clothing with laces. She looked puzzled. What is this? The pattern is so pretty. Is it to be worn outside? Mag was sipping his afternoon tea leisurely with his legs crossed. When he heard the footsteps, he turned around and saw Connie, who was wearing a tidy sky blue windbreaker with a black-laced bra. He spat out the tea in his mouth. Chapter 1195. Meg was dumbfounded when he saw Connie wearing a bra on the outside. Previously, there was Superman wearing underwear on the outside. Today, there was Catwoman wearing a bra on the outside. Was she trying to be a superhero? What's wrong? Am I that pretty? Connie touched the lace and looked at Meg in surprise. She didn't expect Meg to have such a big reaction after changing clothes. I say, this bra is supposed to be worn inside. Why are you wearing it outside? Meg asked with raised eyebrows. Wear it inside. Why? Connie was puzzled. She tugged at the lace. Look, the pattern is so pretty. Wouldn't it look better if I wore it outside? This is a bra. Its function is. Meg gestured with his hand in front of his chest. He felt that it wasn't easy to describe, so he simply said, anyway, this is a bra. It's meant to be worn close to the body. You can't wear it outside for others to see, especially men. It's against etiquette. If it can't be seen, then why is it made to look so pretty? There are small flowers and hollowed-out embroidery. It's such a pretty little bra. It'd be a pity if it can't be seen. Connie was still puzzled. Meg said helplessly, bras are made to look exquisite and cute. Apart from the fact that women like to look pretty, part of the reason is for their men to see in certain private situations. This kind of relationship is limited to lovers. No one would wear it outside. I see. Connie was deep in thought. Then, her eyes fell on Meg. Her eyes lit up. Then I'll wear it for you. Meg was confused. Did this girl not understand what he said? I don't have a lover, but I want someone to see how I look in this pretty little bra. Then, please be my lover for the time being, Connie said innocently. No. Meg refused flatly. Although he didn't mind watching a voluptuous lingerie show, he wasn't sure when Gina would return to the cafeteria, or if Amy, who was in class next door, would come back to the cafeteria to play for a while during the break. It would be hard to explain if they were to bump into each other. Also, there's a hidden buckle at the back of this little shirt. If you tie it directly, it will damage the elasticity of the shoulder strap. Meg glanced at the straps that were casually tied together behind Connie's back. The instructions given by the system were clearly very detailed. But, you're disheveled. You're fired, Meg said coldly. Connie shut her mouth and went upstairs obediently. 10 minutes later, Connie came downstairs with a defeated look on her face. Holding the black bra in her hand, she stammered, I can't make them clasp together. Can you teach me? Meg looked at Connie and felt that he had been completely defeated by her stupidity. He reached out and took the black bra. There was no other way. It seemed like he could only teach her step by step. Look, first put your hands through the shoulder straps, then straighten the position of the bra so that it fits the curve of your body completely. Then, put your hands behind your back and grab a strap each. Use your fingers to feel the position of the hidden buckle. Fasten the hidden buckle, and the bra is put on. Do you understand now? Meg asked Connie. Connie nodded. Looking at Meg in the black bra, she asked curiously, but why are you so familiar with it? You'll naturally know how to tie it up after untying it too much, Meg said casually as he untied the bra with one hand. After Meg drowned, Connie took the bra upstairs again. Finally, Mr. Meg. Connie's voice came from upstairs. What's wrong now? Mag went upstairs with a despondent expression. The bathroom door was half open, revealing a beautiful back that was as smooth as jade. Her fair skin and beautiful curves slowly contracted downwards. By the time it reached her waist, it was already too small to hold in one's hand. Mag was caught off guard, so he took a few serious glances at it. My hands seem to be too short. I can't buckle it up. Connie turned around and looked at Meg in embarrassment. Her arms went up and down to grab the straps behind her back. She kept going back and forth, but it was just a hair's breadth away. I'm sorry to trouble you. Meg sighed and reached out to help her buckle the straps. He closed the bathroom door with a click. What kind of idiot was this? After a series of messing around, Connie finally put on her work uniform correctly. She stood in front of Meg in high spirits. The clothes were too comfortable to wear. They completely insulated her from the cold. Even though it was a little hot to wear them indoors, Connie couldn't bear to take them off. Meg sized up Connie. The sky blue jacket fit her body perfectly. There were 2 dark lines on her arms and pants, which made the jacket look even more three-dimensional. On the other hand, Connie's excellent figure, as well as her somewhat elegant and noble temperament when she was serious, made the takeout outfit look like a custom-made item. Of course, this was built on the premise that she didn't say anything. The temperature outside was below -10 degrees Celsius, so Meg had the system add a layer of top-quality goose down to the jacket. Although it was light, it was very warm. It had the advantages of both a jacket and a down jacket, so it didn't need to worry about the cold at all. On her back, there were 3 eye-catching words. Are you full? Yes, this was the takeout brand that Meg had established in this world. The service's motto was, "Are you full? If not, I'll send you more." Since there was no phone or internet in this world, the real-time interaction was too poor, so Meg didn't have any plans to expand for now. He hadn't even thought about how to launch his first takeout business. He couldn't let a customer order food and then have a delivery person send them home, right? Let's go. Let's practice driving. Meg took a dark blue safety helmet from the counter and put it on Connie's head. Then, he walked towards the door. The safety helmet stuffed Connie's entire head into it. The super high-tech goggles provided her with a wide 270 degrees view. There was also a small screen on the top right, which was currently black. Wow, that's so cool. Connie followed behind Mag and looked around in awe. Then, she banged her head against the door. Meg looked back at Connie, who was like an alien, holding the door in a flurry. He suddenly hesitated whether to teach her how to drive. If she was on the road, she would probably be a killer. The bicycle should be fine, right? Meg looked at the scientifically modified takeout bicycle in front of him. It was fully shock-absorbing, and the front basket was enlarged by several times. There was also a back seat with 2 delivery boxes installed. Its capacity was far greater than that of an ordinary delivery man's. What's this? Connie walked over a little exaggeratedly, and asked curiously. Chapter 1196. This is a bicycle. Your job is to be a delivery man. You're responsible for delivering food to the customers. In order to ensure the freshness of the food, we need to deliver it faster. You have to learn how to ride a bicycle before you officially start working. Meg explained. Bicycle? Connie walked around the bicycle. Is it a bicycle that can run on its own as long as I sit on it? It's called a driverless bicycle. Meg shook his head. He didn't want to continue this silly conversation with Connie. He held the handlebars and got on the bicycle. I'll show you how to ride a bicycle. You have to learn it before sunset today. Okay. Connie answered and looked at Meg seriously. She had already made up her mind. She had to work hard to stay in the restaurant and make money to improve her strength so that she could return to the tribe as soon as possible to save her brother. That big bad guy had already become the new chief. She didn't know how long her brother could live. If he completely controlled the tribe, he might kill her brother. She had to find a way as soon as possible. Meg rode the bicycle and explained in detail how to step on the pedals, how to balance the bicycle, and how to brake to stop the bicycle. Do you know how to ride? Meg stopped beside Connie and looked at her. Yes, my eyes. Connie nodded. You're so honest. Meg was speechless. He stuffed the handlebars into Connie's hands. Start practicing. You won't be able to ride a bicycle without falling a few times. Okay, I'll definitely learn. Connie said confidently. She held the handlebars with both hands and imitated Meg's movements. She flipped onto the bicycle and put her feet on the pedals. Then she swayed left and right, trying hard to maintain her balance. Meg stood beside her and couldn't help swaying left and right. 5 minutes later, Meg looked at Connie, who was still swaying left and right on the pedals. He couldn't help but ask, "Are you practicing the balance beam? Why don't you walk?" "Okay." Connie responded. As soon as she lifted her foot, the balance she had maintained for 5 minutes was broken. The car tilted to the right and plunged headfirst into the thick snow in the nearby haystack. Her entire head, including the helmet, sank in. Aya, it's stuck. Help! Connie's weak cries for help could be heard from the snow. Her 2 legs were dangling in the air, kicking powerlessly. Mag walked over, grabbed Connie's legs, and pulled her out from the snow upside down. This lass was small, so she wasn't heavy. Connie's feet landed on the ground again. Her body swayed a little before she regained her balance. She said in a panic, "Why is it so dark? Am I blind?" "Keep in touch," Meg said flatly as he wiped the snow off his helmet. He had already gotten used to Connie's idiotic behavior. Although her first fall was a little comical, her sense of balance was not bad. This was undoubtedly a very useful talent for learning how to ride a bicycle. Okay. Connie responded, and continued to practice on the bike. After being pulled out of the snow by Mag for the nth time, Connie finally pedaled the bicycle, and rode it forward unsteadily. Although she almost fell over countless times along the way, her good sense of balance saved her every time. Whoa! I learned how to ride a bicycle. Connie didn't finish her sentence before she fell headfirst into the snow. Meg walked over helplessly and pulled her out of the snow. He said coldly, "Continue." Connie's talent for learning how to ride a bicycle in such a short amount of time on her first try was actually not bad. However, he didn't want to make her too proud, so he didn't praise her. After more than an hour of practice and countless falls, Connie braked and drifted. She stopped the bike in front of Meg. She reached out to pull up her helmet. Steam rose from the top of her head, but her face was full of joy. She looked at Meg and said, "I learned, didn't I?" "Yes, you've learned." Meg looked at Connie, who was sweating profusely but smiling happily. His impression of her changed a little. If other girls fell over and over like her, they would have squatted at the side and cried, or given up straight away. However, Connie didn't. It was as if she was holding back her energy. She fell over and over again, and got up again and again. There were a few times when she fell on the ground, but she got up very quickly. She wasn't like the cat-eared girl who cried just now. Then, "Do I start working now?" Connie was eager to try. "No. I'm going to bring you to familiarize yourself with the streets of Chaos City. The most important thing in delivering food is to deliver it to the customer quickly and accurately. So, after you receive the order, you have to know where you have to send the food to, and how to take the route. These are all very important things." Meg shook his head, and then pointed to the top right corner of Connie's helmet. "I've installed a map there. Although it can't pinpoint the location in real time, it will automatically plan the best delivery route for you as long as you tell it the destination." Connie put the helmet back on, and a map appeared on the black screen at the top right corner of the helmet. "That's awesome." Connie's eyes widened. Mr. Meg was a genius. Not only did he invent the bicycle, he even invented such an amazing map. Meg pushed his bicycle out, and got on. He then reminded Connie, "Remember, don't remove your helmet when you're outside. That way, no one will recognize you." Millimeter HM. Connie nodded. Mr. Meg was so thoughtful. Furthermore, the helmet wasn't heavy at all, and it was super warm inside. She didn't want to take it off when she was outside. "Let's go. I'll show you around Chaos City." Meg pedaled the bicycle away first, and Connie quickly got on as well, and followed behind Meg. Who's this cute cat-eared big sister? Father actually taught her how to ride a bicycle, and they even came out of the restaurant together just now. What's their relationship? Should I record this in my little notebook? Amy mumbled softly as she leaned against the window on the second floor of the magic potion shop, and watched the two of them disappear into the distance. Meg brought Connie around the southern part of the city, and saw that it was almost 5 p.m., so he brought her back to the restaurant. Anyway, the system only required him to open up the food delivery system, and gave him a lot of autonomy in other aspects. Hence, he decided to do limited food delivery within a limited area. Since the food in the restaurant couldn't meet the demand, he didn't even think about making money from food delivery. A few orders would be enough. The most important thing was to complete the system's mission, and get the recipe for the Mandarin duck hot pot. "Father, who's this woman?" Amy pushed the door open and entered just as Meg and Connie arrived at the restaurant. Chapter 1197. Amy looked at Connie with indignation and anger in her eyes. She was like a kitten who had just discovered that the dried fish she had hidden had been eaten by her owner. "Amy, she's..." Meg looked at Amy, who seemed a little angry, and prepared to explain the situation. "You actually have a daughter behind my back." Connie also shrieked at this moment. She looked at Meg with resentment, like a wife who had suddenly discovered that her husband was keeping another woman behind her back and had even given birth to a child. Even Meg was taken aback by her natural acting skills, vivid emotions, and overflowing anger. He couldn't help but recall his relationship with this young girl. That's not right. What kind of azure field is this? I've only taken in a homeless girl who was forced by a bad guy and made her temporarily serve as a delivery girl at a restaurant. Meg quickly came back to his senses. He flicked Connie's forehead, who was glaring at him as if she wanted an explanation immediately. He rolled his eyes and said, "Am I supposed to be a stranger in front of you?" "Ooh." Connie covered her forehead with her hand and murmured with indignation, "But you really didn't tell me that you have a daughter." Then Meg looked at Amy. This little fellow had never been hostile to beautiful big sisters, but her behavior today was a little unusual. Amy felt Meg's gaze and immediately smiled widely. "Actually, I'm just curious who this beautiful big sister with cat ears is. Those pink and white cat ears are so cute. Can I touch them?" "Of course. Little sister, you're so cute too. You're just like a little elf." Connie nodded with a smile. She looked at Amy with joy in her eyes. She loved playing with children the most. She felt that playing with and interacting with them was more enjoyable. Meow Tilda. At this moment, Ugly Duckling walked out from behind Amy and stretched lazily. Then, it looked at Connie with disdain, walked up, and jumped lightly onto the cabinet. Pa, Ugly Duckling's head crashed into the edge of the counter, and even though it tried its best to grab onto the table with its paws, it still slid down slowly. It landed on the ground with a dull thud, and lay on its back as it stared at the counter with a dejected expression. "This cat is so dumb." Connie chuckled. "The pot calling the kettle black," Meg thought. "Ugly Duckling, I told you not to eat so much." Amy looked at Ugly Duckling with disappointment written all over her little face, and said seriously, "Your dinner is cancelled today, and you have to run 10 laps around the restaurant. Otherwise, you're not allowed to go to sleep." Meow Tilda. Ugly Duckling immediately got up and walked over to Amy's feet while shaking its head. It rubbed its head against her calf, trying to act cute in exchange for dinner. "There's no room for discussion." Amy shook her head coldly. "Meow." Ugly Duckling lay on the ground with its paws in the air, dejected. Yabemia and the others arrived soon after. When they saw Connie, they were all curious about who this adorable cat-eared young girl was. So many beautiful young ladies. Mr. Meg is indeed a powerful man, Connie thought to herself. In the past, she could still be considered the belle of the tribe, but now, in this restaurant, it seemed like any young lady was prettier than her. Meg introduced, "This is Connie, a new employee I just hired today. She will be working with all of you in the future, and will be responsible for the delivery of food. Let's get to know each other." "Hello, I'm Connie," Connie greeted everyone. "Connie, hello, I'm MIA. Welcome to the restaurant." MIA was the first to go up, and gave Connie a gentle hug with an amiable smile. "Hello, I'm Barbara." Barbara went up and shook hands with Connie. Then, she looked at her cat ears curiously. "Are these real ears?" "They're real," Connie said proudly. As she spoke, her pinkish-white cat ears twitched. "So cute." Barbara's eyes lit up. She had never seen a cat-eared girl in the Moon Nation. She felt like her blood was going to drain. Meow Tilda. Ugly Duckling went up to Amy and started twitching its ears crazily. "You're just a duck. Even if you can move your ears, you're just a fat duck that can move your ears." Amy turned Ugly Duckling's face to Connie. "Look at big sister Connie's pinkish-white ears. How adorable." Meow Tilda. Ugly Duckling meowed aggrievedly and looked at Connie with hostility. "Elizabeth." Elizabeth introduced herself coldly. She wasn't good at interacting with people. In Amy's, she had changed a lot. "Hello." Connie replied carefully. She could feel the aura of a powerful person from Elizabeth. This cold and elegant woman was very powerful. At such a young age, it meant that she had super talent. This was what she wanted. "You guys chat first. I'll go and make dinner." Meg turned and walked towards the kitchen. It seemed like Connie would be able to get along well with everyone. After all, other than her stupid thinking, Connie's appearance and personality were actually quite likable. The steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers at noon didn't significantly increase Connie's IQ. Hence, Meg gave up on the idea of feeding her brain at night. Instead, he made a spicy grilled fish. Connie thought chopped chili was already the spiciest, but after chewing a piece of pepper, she successfully cried because of the spiciness. My mouth isn't mine anymore," Connie said in a sobbing tone as she smacked her lips. Tears were already glistening in her eyes. Everyone burst into laughter when they saw Connie's embarrassed look. After dinner, MIA and the others helped to clean up the dining room. Then, where will Connie be staying at night? MIA asked Meg. Although Connie didn't tell them about her background in detail, she didn't hide that she had nowhere to go. Connie looked at Meg and thought in her heart, although it's not very good to sleep on the same bed with a man, if he invites me, should I reject or accept? After Phyllis left, her room is empty. Let Connie stay there, Meg said directly. Shouldn't I be sleeping with you? Connie blurted out. Everyone turned to look at Meg and Connie in surprise. Was there some secret relationship between the two of them? I'm a man that you can't sleep with. Meg glanced at Connie and said calmly, go with MIA and the others. Go sleep in the staff dormitory. Today is Monday, and the weather is fine. Father saved a cute big sister with cat ears, and she invited him to sleep with her. Amy wrote a line in her little notebook. Chapter 1198. Before going to bed that night, Meg told Amy and Anna a short story as usual. Amy had already fallen asleep with Ugly Duckling in her arms. Anna, who was lying next to her, closed her eyes. Soon, she opened her eyes and looked at Meg. Anna, what's wrong? Can't sleep? Meg asked softly. The little girl seemed to have something on her mind. I'm thinking if big sister Phyllis has reached the place, and if big sister Shirley is doing well. Anna nodded with a worried expression. Meg suddenly realized that the little one was worried about Phyllis and Shirley. She was really a sensible and kind child. He smiled and said, so that's what you're worried about. The people who sent Phyllis to the north have returned. They told me that Phyllis has safely reached the meeting place with the night elves, and they even met Shirley. She's doing well. She's not injured, and there's food now. Phyllis will cook for them. Really? Anna's eyes lit up. Millimeter. Meg nodded with certainty. That's great. It's good that they're fine, Anna said with a smile. So, our little Anna should quickly go to bed. Otherwise, they'll be worried about whether you can sleep well and eat well, Meg said with a smile as he tucked Anna in. Millimeter. Anna closed her eyes obediently. Meg switched off the lights and went to the balcony to practice his swordsmanship for a while. He took a shower before lying down on the bed and thinking about the takeout. Expanding the takeout section was a way for many restaurants to increase their revenue. However, that was on Earth. The convenience and speed of mobile ordering and the huge number of yellow and blue nights provided the basic conditions for real-time delivery. Now, not only were there no mobile phones, but there were also no telephones. How the customers ordered became the problem that Meg had to consider. It's too unrealistic to forcefully bring this world into the age of telecommunications for a takeout. Let's not talk about how many years it would take to plan this. The most important thing is how to complete tomorrow's mission. Meg rejected the idea of popularizing telephones. After thinking seriously for a while, an idea suddenly flashed through his mind. The system's words gave him a good idea. Tatari City was situated at the northwestern border of the Roth Empire. There were 50,000 Imperial cavalrymen stationed there, and it was the most important military base at the northwestern border of the empire. Further west was the Orcs' territory. The Orc tribes and the Roth Empire had been going through wars of varying degrees all year round. For the past few decades, the Orcs had used their great power and mobility to pillage the villages and towns at the borders of the empire. The people at the borders had suffered immensely. However, ever since Alex took over Tata, he no longer chased after the plundering Orcs. Instead, He led his troops to the hinterland of the orcs 3 times and slaughtered several tribes that had invaded the borders of the empire many times. He did not let a single one of them go. Since then, the Beastmen tribes no longer dared to cross the border to plunder. However, large and small wars never stopped at the northwest border. Alex was no longer the city lord of Tatari. Now, Crown Prince Sean was the city lord of this majestic city. As the commander-in-chief of the Northwest Army, Sean was also the city lord of this strategic town. Yesterday, Sean had just returned from Rodu to the city lord's castle in Tatari. In the city lord's castle, Sean and 4 to 5 armored generals gathered in the meeting hall. A middle-aged general looked at Sean and said, "Your Highness, the Empire's Northwest Army is basically under your control now. It has a strength of 300,000, and they are all valiant cavalry that have been fighting against the orcs for a long time. His Majesty has not appointed you as the successor to the throne for a long time. Recently, he has been changing the deputy generals of the Northwest Army. What do you think? You want me to rebel?" Sean looked up at that general with a cold voice. That general did not avoid his gaze. He stood up decisively and said, "Your Highness is wise and courageous. You have been fighting at the borders for more than 10 years, and have gone through life and death with us. We have long regarded you as the successor to the throne. That Second Highness has been living like a prince in Rodu since he was young. He doesn't know how to command troops, nor does he know the ferocity of the orcs. If he becomes the king, he will definitely not be a good king. If the king insists on appointing the Second Highness as the successor, we are willing to honor you as the king." The other generals also stood up at the same time, and respectfully said to Sean, "We are willing to honor your Highness as the king." Sean looked at the generals, and his expression softened slightly. However, his voice was still low, and he said, "Father is still healthy. Don't mention the matter of the throne again, and don't mention it to anyone else. Otherwise, all of you and I will die." But that general still wanted to say something. Josh may have the support of the Magus Tower, but magic casters are ultimately just assistants. They can't achieve great things. He should be more anxious than I am. Why should we be anxious? Sean chuckled as a sinister look flashed across his eyes. Rodu, Magus Tower. The towering Magus Tower could overlook the entire Rodu, and even the royal palace could be seen at a glance. As the number of magic casters increased and the power of the Magus Tower increased, the status of the Magus Tower gradually became equal to that of the military. The magic casters of the Empire more or less had the mark of the Magus Tower on them. They fought in the army like the knights, guarding the Empire's territory and protecting the Empire's citizens. They were deeply respected and loved by the citizens. At this moment, on the top floor of the Magus Tower, Josh was standing by the window, looking at the similarly towering Royal Palace Tower. He didn't know how long it would take for him to officially enter that palace and become the most powerful person on the Norland continent. Many years ago, as the second prince, he had never thought of becoming the master of that palace. Magic was more attractive to him than that throne that was studded with gems. Until he met the elven princess who left a message on the top floor of the Magus Tower, he fell in love at first sight. That was it. After that, Alex appeared. Then, her heart ran away with him. That was a man who made all the men in the world pale in comparison. He was like the brightest star that suddenly appeared. Even though he was the second prince of the Empire, he was still so lowly that people could easily overlook him. From then on, he understood that even if he spent his entire life learning magic, he would never be able to defeat Alex before the end of his life. Thus, he began to crave and pursue power. A man, even if he was a god, would still be bitten to death by countless ants. 3 years ago, he thought that Alex was already dead, and that Irina's heart was about to belong to him. However, 3 years later, he appeared again, still as powerful and invincible as ever, and stole her heart again. Josh turned to Richard, who was standing behind him, and asked, "President, when can I become the king of the Roth Empire?" "Soon." Richard cast his deep gaze toward the royal palace, and then looked up into the sky. A bright star was gradually dimming as if it had been covered by a layer of fog. He murmured to himself, "The Emperor Star is about to be destroyed, and a new king is about to be born." In a large courtyard in the northwestern corner of the royal palace, there were dozens of carpenters who were busy with their work. Yuri sat on a high chair, looking at the Mecca that had been modified to become even more majestic. He sighed and said, "Idiot, do you think many people will die if we use this on the battlefield?" "Your Highness," His Majesty said that this is to be used to guard the territory, and it can reduce the casualties of many knights, a servant at the side whispered in agreement. If it's just to guard the territory, who would dare to invade the empire apart from the giant dragons? If the giant dragons were to invade, these pieces of wood wouldn't be of much use. Yuri shook his head, but there was still a hint of melancholy in his eyes. He looked up into the sky, and sadly said, "I suddenly want to play with that little idiot." Chapter 1199. Connie, this is your room. Boss has prepared a set of toiletries for you in the bathroom. Yours is blue, Mia said with a smile as she led Connie into the room. "Thank you," Connie said. Her eyes were completely attracted by the furnishings and warm decorations in the room. There was a big comfortable bed, a beautiful dressing table, and a floor-to-ceiling window facing the square. When the curtains were pulled open, the starlight shone through the window. "This room is amazing," Connie exclaimed. She lay down gently on the bed and felt the soft silk blanket slowly wrap around her. The warm and soft feeling was too comfortable. After sleeping in the open for half a month, she finally had a place to stay. She didn't expect it to be so comfortable. Mia looked at Connie, who was lying on the bed, and smiled. When she lay on the big bed in the room for the first time, she felt the same way as Connie. She felt that she could lie on the bed for the rest of her life because it was so comfortable. After enjoying the softness and warmth on the bed for a while, Connie reluctantly got up to wash up. When she entered the bathroom, she was slightly surprised to see the 2 taps. Boss is really a dragon fetish. He even installed taps in the staff dormitory, Connie muttered. Then she turned on the tap and splashed a handful of warm water on her face. She smiled widely. "I'm going to install taps at home in the future. It's so convenient. By the way, how long has Mammoth been closed? Why do I feel like it's been 100 years? It's been closed for 7 or 8 days. Is Mr. Mac too full of himself? He didn't open the store for more than 10 days. Bro, your math. Did you learn it from your PE teacher? Don't tell me. Our PE teacher was our math teacher's husband. He took up our math teacher's class every day and didn't go to the field. He only taught us math. Half of our class almost didn't graduate. Early in the morning, there was a long line in front of Mammoth. Many people arrived earlier than the cleaners. When they saw the notice on the door had been removed, they sighed in relief. The cleaners arrived at Mammoth at 6:30 a.m. on time. They hadn't eaten Mr. Mac's kanji for 2 days, so they felt a lot colder when they were sweeping. A mouthful of kanji early in the morning could warm them up for the whole day. The door opened with a soft ding. Mia came out with a big pot in her hands. Barbara and the others came out with big bowls. Meg was at the back of the line with a big spoon and a notice board. Harrison, who was at the front of the line, curiously asked, "Boss Mag, you said yesterday that you were releasing a new product today. Is it out?" Everyone's eyes lit up upon hearing that. Could it be that Boss Mag had taken a few days off to develop a new product? If there was a new delicacy that could comfort his stomach that had been waiting for a few days, then he could forget about being stood up for no reason. It's written on the notice board. Meg hung the notice board on the door with a smile. He carried the big spoon to the metal bucket whose lid had been removed. Today's new item, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Available only at noon and in the evening. Everyone looked at the notice board. Someone at the front of the line read it out loud. Steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers? It sounds like another spicy fish dish. Shouldn't the fish head be thrown away? Why can it still be made into a dish? Is it really delicious? As someone who likes to eat fish, I'm really looking forward to this new item. Also, the meat near the fish head is super tender. The customers in the line started to talk about the new item. Meg just smiled and didn't answer. Deliciousness could only be understood by tasting it. If he said too much, it would be easy for people to make unnecessary associations. He scooped the piping hot congee with pork and century egg into big bowls and passed it to the cleaners whose hands and feet were cold. Looking at the honest smiles on their faces would make one's mood better. With the help of MIA and the rest, more than 30 bowls of congee with pork and century egg were quickly distributed to the cleaners. They held the big bowls and slurped the hot congee while sitting on the steps. The regulars who came to line up early in the morning couldn't help but swallow their saliva. "Mr. Mac, why don't you sell me a bowl of congee with pork and century egg in your pot? Who can stand watching others eat so early in the morning and didn't eat enough last night?" A regular said to Meg with a melancholy look. "Yeah, Mr. Mac. Look at how early we came. Let everyone have a mouthful of hot congee first. We're all regular customers. We can even stand to eat." The other customers also echoed. A bowl of hot congee in the middle of winter was better than anything else. Although most of them were famous people, they didn't care at all. The congee with pork and century egg was just launched by Mammy Restaurant a few days ago. It was only available for breakfast. As the youtiao and soy milk were too delicious, not many people were interested in trying this new breakfast dish that had just been launched. However, the customers in the line were cold and hungry. Looking at the hot congee and smelling the tempting fragrance, their stomachs started to growl. Only then did they realize that they might have underestimated this breakfast item. "It's not opening time yet. This congee with pork and century egg is specially provided for them, so I can't sell it to you." Meg shook his head. There was no room for negotiation. He was a little puzzled and said, "Besides, there's still an hour before opening time. You can come and line up later. Why do you have to line up so early in the morning? If you line up earlier every day, won't you be the ones who suffer? Mr. Mac, isn't this your fault? I go to work at 8 o'clock. In order to eat breakfast made by you before going to work, if I come late and line up at the back, I'll definitely be late for work." A young lady coughed twice and complained. "Yeah, we want to come later, but if we come later, the seats in front will be taken. Mr. Mac, the more famous you are, the more difficult it will be for us customers. Talking about it makes me cry." The other customers nodded. Who wouldn't want to sleep in their warm beds at home at this time because they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to make it in time for breakfast? Most of the people who came early had to go to work to open the store. Of course, there were also people who came early because they hadn't eaten Mammy's food for 3 days. Meg looked at the crowd and felt a little apologetic. It was really not easy to line up so early in the middle of winter. Everyone looked at Meg and wondered if Meg would be moved and make breakfast for them in advance. Meg thought about it seriously and said, "How about this? I'll set a rule. In the future, we won't allow customers to line up half an hour before opening time. Even if you come early, you can only line up half an hour earlier." Chapter 1200. That's a good idea. Otherwise, when Mr. Mac becomes famous in the future, those people will line up in the middle of the night. Then, us regulars won't be able to eat your food, Harrison agreed. The other customers nodded in agreement. This way, they wouldn't have to worry about others lining up too early. Meg had thought of a good idea. The regulars all knew Meg's temper. He definitely wouldn't provide them with breakfast before the time was up. Furthermore, the food in the pot was for the cleaners, so there was no extra food for them. Therefore, they didn't continue to mention the previous meal. "These fellows, I'll see how long you can eat. None of these rich people are good. They're just suddenly showing kindness. They'll regret it soon." Elton was chewing on a cold pancake in the distance. He shivered, and looked in the direction of Amy's with hatred as he muttered to himself. Then, he took a big bite of the pancake in his hand. After the cleaners were done with their breakfast, Mia returned to the dining hall with the remaining half of the large bucket. This was their breakfast. "There are so many customers. Will anyone recognize me?" Connie hid in the restaurant, and looked at the people outside worriedly. Then, she silently put on the helmet. "Say, don't you feel hot wearing a helmet in the restaurant?" Meg looked at the fully equipped Connie, and couldn't help but laugh. The temperature in the restaurant was 26 degrees Celsius, and this fellow was wearing equipment that could drive at -15 degrees Celsius. Wasn't this a joke? I feel like I'm going to get a heat stroke. Connie's weak voice came out from the hat, and then she fainted on the spot. Connie, are you okay? Everyone gathered around and looked at Connie with concern. However, none of them were good at healing magic, so they couldn't do anything at the moment. Leave it, I'll do it. Meg put the spoon in his hand into the bucket, and then walked towards Connie helplessly. A certain cat-eared girl got a heat stroke at -15 degrees Celsius because she wore too many clothes. If this kind of ridiculous news were to spread, it should be able to get a place in the ridiculous world, right? Meg thought to himself. He took the helmet off Connie's head, and then opened her down jacket. He asked the system to lower the temperature in her area by a few degrees, and then took out a bottle of Huaxiong water from the medicine box and poured it down her throat. Amy, who was yawning, came downstairs and saw this scene. She couldn't help but open her eyes wide. Father put Sister Connie, who's sweating on the ground, and then pulled her clothes of her mouth. What is he doing? Connie's eyes watery, and said to what of's to taste. What of the world? She looked like a young girl who had just woken up after being drugged. What should have happened had already happened, and she was looking innocently at the person who had drugged her. I've done what needed to be done. Meg stood up calmly and walked to the table. You. Connie looked like she had been wronged. Connie, the boss saved you. Drink some water, and then eat. Yabemia brought a cup of warm water over, and helped Connie up with a smile. I see. Connie looked at the people around her. With so many people watching, the boss probably didn't do anything strange to her. She took the cup of water and rinsed her mouth. The strange smell was so strong that it woke her up immediately. Don't wear the helmet and jacket in the restaurant in the future. Otherwise, you'll continue to faint, Meg said to Connie, who was about to zip up her jacket again. Okay. Connie nodded. She put the helmet to the side, and then took off her jacket. It's much cooler now, Connie muttered. Because she was afraid of the cold a few days ago, she couldn't bear to take off her warm clothes now that she was wearing them. After breakfast, Meg sent Amy to class, and hung a notice on the door. Mama's takeout service trial. Starting today, the restaurant's food delivery service is limited to customers who can't come to the restaurant in person but must eat the restaurant's food. Dishonest customers will be blacklisted. Today's trial is limited to one order. A customer read aloud. Takeout? What's that? Takeout service? Does that mean we can eat Mama's food at home? Isn't this restriction a bit harsh? As long as your legs are healthy, you'll probably be excluded from the restricted group, right? The key is that it's limited to one order, right? Does that mean it's only one order per day? The customers soon showed great interest in the content of the announcement, but they also felt that it was not very practical. After all, they were going to the restaurant in person. Why would they order takeout to eat at home? Wouldn't it be more enjoyable to sit in the restaurant and eat the freshly cooked food? Tilda, what should we have for breakfast today? Yangju fried rice or soy milk and youtiao? In the line, a young woman covered her mouth and coughed lightly. She looked thoughtful, and suddenly her eyes lit up. Oh right, why don't we try the kanji with pork and century egg that the cleaners had just now? They looked pretty good eating it. Bonnie was the manager of a medium-sized jewelry store. She was able to get to this position at the age of 26, which showed her ability. However, it wasn't so easy to be a manager. Back then, she had been first in sales for 3 consecutive years. She didn't know how many customers she had to receive every day, and how many compliments she had to say. She almost didn't rest all day long, and although she paid attention to taking care of her throat, it still caused problems. Although she didn't need to receive a large number of customers now, she still had to personally receive many of the regulars. Her throat was often dry and itchy, especially when she woke up every morning. No matter how much warm water she drank, it didn't help. She didn't feel like eating anything. She happened to hear a customer mention Amy's, so she came over with the intention of giving it a try. She unearthed a huge gourmet treasure, and her daily breakfast was settled. Although her throat was still dry and itchy, the problem of her stomach was finally solved. In the jewelry business, image and etiquette were very important. It was very rude to cough in front of customers. Although she tried her best to control it, she still couldn't help but cough once or twice sometimes. There were many capable girls eyeing her position. 2 days ago, her boss even specially talked to her for a while. Although it was in the name of concern, she knew in her heart that if the condition of her throat continued to be like this, or worsened, then she wouldn't be far from losing this job. During this period of time, she had taken a lot of medicine, but the effect was really mediocre. She was already prepared to find a magic pharmacist recommended by a customer after work today to try it out. The restaurant opened for business, and the customers in the front line took their seats. Connie flipped open the menu and took a look. When Mia came over to order, she gently closed the menu and said with a smile, "I'll have a congee with pork and century egg and a sweet tofu pudding. Thank you." Chapter 1201. Bonnie looked up at the alarm clock hanging on the wall. She had to receive a distinguished guest this morning, Madame Mafia from the Marquis family. She was a regular customer of the jewelry store, and spent tens of millions on jewelry every year. She had known Madame Mafia for many years, and she was the one who received her every time. That had never changed after she became the store manager. However, Madame Mafia had a severe case of misophobia, and her requirements for all aspects were almost perverted. After interacting with her for so many years, Bonnie was already used to dealing with all kinds of situations. However, the problem she had to worry about today was not others, but her own throat. Cough, cough. Bonnie coughed softly with her handkerchief, and nodded apologetically to the elf sitting opposite her. If she coughed in front of Madame Mafia, she might not come to this jewelry store again. Her job, which was already in a precarious situation, might become even worse. I should have gone to find that magic pharmacist yesterday. Even if it's just an emergency potion, I should have prepared a portion. She sighed in her heart. She could only go to the shop and drink more water to stop her coughing. Your congee with pork and century egg and sweet tofu pudding. Yabemia walked over with a tray, and placed the congee with pork and century egg and sweet tofu pudding down. The aroma of meat and a unique aroma wafted over along with the hot steam. Smells so good. Bonnie's eyes lit up, and her gaze was instantly attracted by the congee with pork and century egg in front of her. There were translucent century eggs and lean meat hidden in the thick white congee, and a small handful of tender chopped green onions was sprinkled on top. The aroma filled the air. Bonnie's stomach was growling after lining up early in the morning. She was craving this congee when she saw the cleaners outside, so she also ordered a portion. Bonnie didn't know if it was her imagination, but the aroma of the congee with pork and century egg seemed to be even stronger than the congee the cleaners ate earlier. Century egg. Mr. Mac is always so interesting when he names his food. Bonnie chuckled, and scooped up a spoonful of congee with the wooden spoon. There was a translucent brown century egg in it. She suddenly had an idea. She raised the wooden spoon and looked out of the window. The crystal-clear century egg was actually shining with a gem-like luster, and its surface was even covered with beautiful patterns that resembled pine flowers. Wow! Bonnie opened her mouth wide in disbelief. She had worked in the jewelry store for so many years, and this was comparable to the luster and transparency of many precious gems. The beautiful and gentle luster made it hard for her to imagine that this was just an egg. This should be called a gem egg. Mr. Mac is a great artist. Bonnie gasped in admiration. She couldn't help but feel curious. A whole century egg should be very beautiful, right? Although she couldn't bear to part with it, the fragrance and her rumbling stomach still made Bonnie eat the porridge with pork and century egg. The porridge melted almost immediately in his mouth, with a hint of meaty aroma and a special egg aroma. Next was the preserved egg, the main character of the porridge. The soft and delicious porridge did not make the century egg soft. It was neither hard nor soft. When it resisted the tongue, it had a strange elasticity. Bonnie let the century egg play on the tip of her tongue for a while. After confirming that there was no way to melt it, she tried to bite it open with her tongue. It was soft and elastic. After biting it open, a faint fragrance bloomed on the tip of her tongue. This was the source of the unique fragrance of the porridge with pork and century egg. The more she chewed, the more fragrant it became. Bonnie chewed on the century egg happily as if she was a child who had discovered a great joy. She felt that her gloomy mood seemed to brighten up a lot. After swallowing the crushed century egg, it turned into a refreshing coolness that slid down her throat into her stomach. It was as if she had swallowed a mouthful of refreshing cough medicine. Bonnie actually felt that the dryness in her throat had lessened a lot, and even her breathing had become much smoother. This is... Bonnie touched her throat in disbelief. The refreshing feeling was gradually fading, but the dryness did not immediately rebound. Instead, it was as if she had been splashed with a scoop of ice water, and she had no strength to fight back at that moment. Could it be that this porridge with pork and century egg can relieve the dryness in my throat? Bonnie was pleasantly surprised. She picked up the spoon and scooped another mouthful of porridge with pork and century egg into her mouth. After swallowing the chewed century egg along with the porridge, the refreshing feeling in her throat became even more obvious. It's really effective. Bonnie ate the porridge with pork and century egg mouthful after mouthful of hot porridge. Her stomach gradually warmed up, but her throat was exceptionally refreshing and warm. The dryness in her throat was completely swept away. This feeling is really too comfortable. There was only one feeling in Bonnie's heart. Usually, she would be bothered by the dryness in her throat for a long time every morning. She had to drink a lot of warm water and take a lot of lozenges to barely relieve it. But now, just a bowl of porridge with pork and century egg had achieved an effect that had never been achieved before. Ding! Bonnie looked at the empty bowl in front of her. She had unknowingly finished a bowl of delicious porridge with pork and century egg. The dryness in her throat had been completely suppressed. The refreshing and warm feeling even made her want to hum a tune. Delicious and unique porridge with pork and century egg. Looks like I don't have to worry about my throat today. Bonnie touched her throat gently with a smile on her face. She moved the empty bowl in front of her to the side, and took the bowl of sweet tofu pudding to eat. Eating a bowl of tofu pudding every morning after waking up made her skin smoother and smoother. The whitening effect was also many times better than pearl powder. This had already become the biggest motivation for Bonnie to come to the restaurant half an hour earlier to line up. If she was late, she wouldn't be able to eat it. May I know if the porridge with pork and century egg can be packed? I would like to pack a small portion to take away. Bonnie finished her tofu pudding, and raised her hand to gesture for Yarbemia to come over. The porridge with pork and century egg can be packed. It's a small portion. Please wait at the counter to collect it. Mia nodded and informed Anna, who then went forward to settle the bill for Bonnie. Thank you. Bonnie received the packed porridge with pork and century egg very quickly, and left Amy's with the porridge with a smile. Although her throat was clear now, and she didn't feel like coughing at all, she didn't like to take risks. She would pack a portion of porridge with pork and century egg to take away, and eat a few mouthfuls before the appointed time to ensure that nothing went wrong. Shia Jewelry was one of the top 3 jewelry stores in Chaos City. It was opened in the busiest part of Aiden Square. There were many jewelry stores around, and Shia Jewelry Store was undoubtedly the most dazzling one. Bonnie was the first to reach the store. She placed the porridge with pork and century egg back in her manager's office before arranging the work for the employees who came to the store one after another. I heard that Madame Mafia would come to the restaurant this morning. The store manager's throat seems to have gotten worse these few days. Will there be any problems? A young employee said softly with a worried expression. Madame Mafia is a clean freak. If the store manager coughs in front of her, she will definitely not come to our Shia Jewelry again. Then, we will lose a big customer. I wonder if the boss will be heartbroken, an older employee said with a chuckle with a hint of schadenfreude in her eyes. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.